What? Adopted? My mother's voice spiked in shrill disbelief. Did I hear that quite right? Don't tell me you're being serious. Completely serious. Mom, I forced out. Rain tried to take my hand, but I stepped away and shook my head, stared at Sarika's back on the hospital bed. I have never been more serious. Please, answer the question. A silence. Sarika's choked words rattled around inside my brain, loose bolts in a machine about to shake itself apart. Propagate adopt, she'd said. Cuckoo. My mind supplied the rest. It would explain so much if Maisie and I were adopted. If we were supernatural cuckoo things, deposited here by the eye in the guise of human beings, to be raised and then returned when ripe. It would explain my phantom limbs and bitter nostalgic dysmorphia too. Perhaps my journey through the abyss had reminded my body of a hidden genetic truth. Perhaps that was why I'd survived the abyss at all. The idea gripped my guts with a terrible sickness and my head with a panic like the walls closing in. If I'd been adopted, what was I really? Where had I come from? Had I never been a real person at all? No. My mother hissed. No, you are most certainly not bloody well adopted. Heather. Not only are you not adopted, it was a pain in the neck to squeeze you out. I what? I've never told you that, have I? Thought you'd find it too grisly, or it might upset you or give you ideas. Perhaps I'll tell the story to your girlfriend when you deign to drag yourself home for a visit, embarrass you in front of her, embarrass us both. Her voice hitched with a note of real hurt, protected behind easy flippancy. You wouldn't come out of me. Didn't want to get out of your first bed. They had to get the awful dilatory forceps to pull you out. Oh, well I was huge with you. I felt like a beached whale for months on end. Your father swore, oh, I've never told you this, Heather, not with all the unpleasantness when you were little, but now you're doing well these days. When we saw you at Christmas you seemed so much better, so much more normal. Happy, even. She paused, and gathered herself as if for confession. When I was pregnant with you, your father swore I was carrying twins. I halted my stammering attempts to excuse myself. Mom. Say that again. Obviously I wasn't, I was just extremely large, but I certainly did eat for 3. You were packed in there like a comfy little Eskimo, double the amount of placental sac as any other baby. So think how I felt all those years later when you had your episode. Like you dreamed yourself a twin in the womb, like I'd dreamed it for you. Oh, Heather, I do apologize. My mother sniffed. I shouldn't be telling you this story, but adopted? No. No, you are not. I couldn't speak. You had carried twins, Mother. It was always twins. The first crack in the eye's erasure of Maisie, in all these years. When I'd first climbed back out of Wonderland and Maisie hadn't, when I'd sat on the floor of my childhood bedroom and screamed my head off, the eye hadn't merely kidnapped my twin sister. It had erased all trace and memory of her. One bed in the room, all her clothes gone, no second face like mine in family photographs. Nobody remembered her, not my parents, not our primary school friends, nobody. But the eye didn't really understand human beings. It had excised my parents' memories of their other daughter, but couldn't magic away the physical history of my mother's body. She didn't recall giving birth to twins, but she remembered a belly big enough for 2. That, more than anything else, more than the outraged tone in her voice, more than the certainty she'd told me the truth, more than the slow dawning realization that my parents were not the sort of people to adopt in the first place, convinced me that I'd gotten this one wrong. I'm sorry, Mom. I smiled with relief, sniffing, backing away from the edge. You're right, I'm sorry, I got an idea into my head from a silly place, and dash. It's not from this girl you're seeing, is it? No. No, quite the opposite. Rain is probably quite unimpressed with me for this phone call. I looked up at Rain, but she beamed at me. Relief as well. She was telling me I was wrong about this, told me it was silly to call. I should have listened to her. Quite right, you should. My mother tooted. She's obviously far more sensible than you are. I suppose that's some comfort. Put her on, will you? I want to have a word. About me? Of course about you. What do you think? Mum, I'm not sure that's appropriate. My mother said something obvious and trite, a huffing and a tooting. Such incredible relief. I should have been disappointed, shouldn't I? Adoption would explain so much, provide a solid lead on why me, why Maisie. But I was not some outside thing, I think pretending to be human, even to myself. I was human, or at least I'd started as one. I am my mother's daughter, with all the messy familial implications. She remembered carrying me in the womb, by a miracle, she remembered carrying Maisie. A new minted part of my mind, an unfamiliar strategic Heather, whispered a victory. The eye is not infallible. It made a mistake. It missed a detail. Fine, fine. I smiled through my mother's words. I'll put Rain on, here she is. I held the phone out to Rain and she accepted it without missing a beat. She tilted her head up, puffed out her chest, and put on her best respectable young woman voice. Mrs. Morell, hello, she paused, laughed. Samantha then, absolutely. Yes, I am, I promise you that. If nothing else, I am trying my best to take good care of her. Rain made attentive noises. I puffed out a huge sigh, red in the face as relief transmuted into deep, mortified embarrassment. Nicole asked me a question with her eyebrows, and I tried to apologize with a silent look. A mutual acquaintance said something hurtful, Rain explained into the phone, serious and measured. I think Heather took it to heart. Yes, I do know how she can get, but I put a great deal of faith in her. I blushed harder, frowned at Rain. She stuck her tongue out at me. Yes, I will, she continued. I'll make sure she does, perhaps for a day or two around Easter. We do get 2 weeks off, after all. Good, great, no problem. Thank you, Samantha, I really do appreciate your confidence, and I understand I have to earn your trust. Here she is. Rain passed the phone back to me. She winked. Mum. Heather, you listen to what that girl tells you, my mother said. I liked her when I met her at Christmas, and I don't think I'm mistaken. She's very sensible, very organized, very together. And no, one more time, you are not adopted. Thank you. Look, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I'll give a proper call sometime soon, okay? This evening. I want to hear all about how you've been. You never talk about how university is going. I want to hear about your work, how you're doing, how you're finding it. Yes. Yes, of course. This evening. I'll call you then. Make sure you do. Goodbye for now, Mum. I ended the call, stared at the phone screen and blew out a long sigh. Well, now I feel profoundly silly. What had I expected? Adoption, really? The existence of werewolves and magic and other dimensions did not mean I was living in a daytime soap opera. Neither fey-born changeling or destined for a mysterious fate. I was, on the grand stage of the world, and the grander stage of reality, not that important except to my friends. You know, the first time we discussed the, giant alien eyeball situation, Nicole said, you told me you weren't at all some kind of chosen one, or special, or any of that Harry Potter junk. Yes, I know, it was a stupid panic. Wasn't stupid. Rain caught my eye, dead serious. The question was worth an ask. True, there's probably a better way than freaking your mum out, but hey. She shrugged and smiled. I nodded. What was that about a day or two around Easter? Visiting your parents. You and I, home cooking, hang out, keep your mother on side. Oh. Oh, right. Well. Was this all a waste of time then? Nicole asked. She stuck her hands in her pockets and looked past us, at Sarika still curled up on the hospital bed with her back to us, wheezing and quivering. She looked so small and fragile, and she'd tangled one arm up in the clear plastic drip lines, but at least she'd stopped sobbing. No, I said at length. Sarika still used those words, I'm sorry, propagate, adopt, that's what she said. Sarika twitched. The ghost of a shrug. Maybe it didn't mean anything. Nicole suggested. Maybe she was just trying to hurt you. That's possible, I suppose. I frowned at Sarika's back. I felt like I had all the puzzle pieces, jumbled up, but I needed to know what the picture showed before I could put them together. Didn't want to hurt Sarika again though, the first time had been terrible enough. No matter what she'd done, I couldn't inflict pain at will. Hey, Sarika. Rain said, bright and clear. She strode forward and leaned on the bed, leaned over to make eye contact. Sarika's head adjusted, and Rain flashed her a smile. Can I call you what, sorry? Sorry. Nah, that doesn't sound right, does it? Sarika, 3-syllable beat, almost musical, yeah. Rain nodded, smile turning rakish. You don't need a pet name, your regular one is good enough. Sarika slurred through a mouth thick with saliva. Sorry's what he called me. Girl, you can do miles better than Alexander. Rain spoke as if we were all sitting in a coffee shop, bonding over love-life trouble, not in a hospital room with a trauma-crippled shell of a human being. Come on, when you got down to it he was a total arsehole. Was. Didn't give a toss about you. Did he? Threw you to the wolves. Dangerous to know, and not in the fun way. Swat, what I like. Liked? I get it. Yeah, that's rough. Can't help what you're into. Rain glanced back at me and winked. Dangerous to know. I suppose that described Rain, in a very different sort of way. Nicole looked utterly baffled. I shrugged too, and nodded to urge Rain on, though I had no idea where she was going with this. Look, forget all of that, Rain told Sarika. Forget him. Think about the future, about how much better you can do. A snort, a single derisive laugh. Sarika managed to flop a hand, the arm with attached drip lines of saline and morphine. The gesture spoke 1,000 words, nobody would want her now. Another puff of laughter, less derisive. Gently, Sarika shook her head. Yay, there you go, Rain said. You know what I'm on about. Perhaps it was Rain's irrelevant change of subject, or perhaps Sarika's reaction. Gave my subconscious a moment to chew on the problem. Like a magic eye illusion snapping into focus, the pieces came together. So here's the deal, Sarika, Rain was saying. You keep thinking about your veritable buffet of buff dudes, and I'm gonna ask you a question. Just nod or shake, no need to think dash. It was the other way around, I said. Rain stopped and looked at me. Nicole raised an eyebrow. Sarika nodded. Found a cuckoo in its nest, she croaked, then flinched. Her breath hitched and she curled in as if to close herself up. Tried to raise it anyway. And tried to raise it anyway, I echoed. Oh my God. Heather. Rain said. I've figured it out. Rain, it was the other way around. I didn't send Maisie and I here as cuckoos, it was the other way around. I spoke so fast I almost babbled, couldn't contain myself. The things in the abyss, it's so obvious, I dash. Hey, Heather, slow down, Rain laughed. The things in the abyss, the leviathans, they bootstrap themselves via thought. That's how they grow, they think. So 10 years ago Maisie and I go to Wonderland, maybe the eye drew us there, or maybe it didn't mean to, or maybe it was all an accident, it doesn't matter, and what does the eye see? Human children. We take so long to grow, our minds take 20 years to fully develop, so slow, absorbing knowledge like a sponge, endless curiosity. To the eye we must have looked like I don't know. Like an infant version of itself. Or a promising candidate. Slowly, rocking herself back and forth, Sarika covered her ears. She didn't want to hear anything about the eye, ever again. We're the cuckoos, I said. To it. Or we were. And it must have figured that out, but tried to adopt us anyway. A giant alien eyeball thinks it's your mother? Nicole asked. Sort of. More like a teacher. Because discovering a cuckoo's egg in your nest doesn't matter if you propagate by thought, if what makes you you is hyperdimensional math, if you don't have DNA, if your biology is an abyss-born nightmare of will-formed flesh. A cuckoo in your nest doesn't matter if you can take the little cuckoo chick and reforge its mind to be like your own. Except it couldn't tell Maisie and I apart, I murmured. We only got half. It thinks half escaped. It's trying to put us back together. I don't know. Sarika heard silence, and gingerly removed her hands from her ears. Rain squeezed her shoulder. Hey, thank you. You did great. I mean it. Do you dash? I spoke up. Sarika, do you know anything about the dead hands? Sarika turned in the bed, so much effort for such a small frame. She stared at me, slack and spent. Lozzie and I can't go outside, beyond, whatever you call it. A feeling like dead hands on my ankles stops me every time. We're stuck here. I thought it might have something to do with what you all did. Lauren Lil, burn. Oh. I'd given that one away for free. I suppose it didn't matter anymore. Lozzie, yes. She's with me now. Alex, little sister. Sarika sniffed hard. A thin trail of tears ran from one eye, soaked into the pillow beneath. He treated her terribly. You were his lover. You must have known, don't give me that. Safe. Yes. I nodded. She's very important to me. I promise I'll try to keep her safe, as best I can. Sarika rolled back over, gave me the cold shoulder, stared out of the window at the gray drizzle. All my friends are dead, she slurred. Don't know anything about your hands. Screw you. Rain left the bed and returned to Nicole and I. Better? She asked, slipped an arm around me, kept her voice low and soft. Yes, thank you. I bit my lip, still mulling over my new hypothesis. I need to talk to Evie about all this. We need more information. Confirmation. It does make sense though. The eye taught me and my sister in order to make another of itself. Well, it buggered that up, didn't it? Rain grinned. You're you, Heather. Still doesn't answer why us. Hurricanes and floods don't have motivation, Nicole suggested. They just happen to people. Maybe you got unlucky. I didn't like that idea, but it was most likely. We make stories of our lives, but often reality is less sensible than fiction. A reason would make too much sense. Blind chance was cruel, but realistic. I stared at Sarika's back, thinking. She'd been complicit in so many horrors, but now she was broken. With the threat from her past, I no longer felt like I could play judge, jury, or executioner. She deserved punishment of some kind, but I couldn't measure it. Not this. Can I come back to visit her again? I asked. I mean, if you want to. Nicole answered, on firmer ground now. If she doesn't mind. Protective custody, police protection, it'll get lifted in time, when it becomes clear this cult doesn't exist anymore. I might do, then. I might do. Nicole gave a very glad that's over sigh. Well, if you two are ready, I'd like you to sit back down. I've got an admission to make. Rain sensed the change before I did. Despite the cold survivalist logic I'd brought back from the abyss, I had nothing on Rain's instincts. She stiffened, shifted her posture onto the balls of her feet, that unmistakable readiness for violence. "Detective," she said. "What are you up to?" "Whoa, whoa." Nicole put both hands up. A career of conflict resolution and interrogation rooms had given her the rare toolset to read Rain's reaction. "Nothing like that. Think of this as my first assignment as a paranormal investigator. A freebie, for you lot. Please, let's have a sit for a minute." "In here?" I asked. "With Sarika?" "Yes. It'll be obvious why, I promise." For a heartbeat, Rain didn't move a muscle, then she seemed to decide Nicole was still on the level. She grabbed a chair from next to the bed for me, while Nicole perched on the hard plastic seat from by the door. Rain stood at my shoulder, radiating threat posture. Nicole gave her a look, then decided better of it. "Nikki?" I asked. She wet her lips, hesitated, then nodded. "I was approached yesterday evening," she said. "At my home, by a person who somehow knew we'd be meeting up here today. This person wants to speak with you." "What? Who?" "Go on, Nikki," Rain said, a dark grin in her voice. "This person decided to go through me, because apparently you'll try to kill her if she appears without warning. Which, you know, considering what I saw last week, sounds pretty credible. You lot aren't above a spot of murder." "I neither confirm nor deny these allegations, officer," said Rain. Nicole rolled her eyes. I knew exactly who she was talking about. My eyes flickered around the room, behind the medical machines and to the door of the attached toilet. My skin itched and crawled with the desire to defend myself, to grow toxic spines and poison sacs, curl into a corner and armor myself in chitin plates, sprout tentacles to constrict and eyes to see in every direction. "Is she dash?" "Yes," Nicole said quickly. "She's here. I'm acting as a guarantor of no violence. We're in a public hospital, I'm a police officer. There's another uniformed officer right down that hallway, so nothing is going to happen. You don't attack her, she doesn't attack you. Got it?" "Nikki, Rain grinned, dark and sardonic, shaking her head. "You sneaky little fox. She got here before you did. I've already searched her, given her a pat down. She's not only unarmed, she's carrying bugger all. A wallet with a single 20-pound note and a fake ID, and a stripped-down phone with no contacts listed. Nothing else." Nicole tried a smile. "So no violence, all right. She's not going to hurt Sarika, is she?" I asked. "No. Sarika agreed she can be here. Anything happens to Sarika a month or two from now, that draws police attention as well." "Where is she?" Rain asked softly. "In the room across the hallway. I'm gonna send her a text message." Nicole took out her mobile phone. "Let her know she can come in now. We good? No violence?" "I won't if she doesn't." Rain shrugged. I swallowed, my heart racing, struggling with phantom limbs and a screaming survival need to flee. The door to the hospital room opened, wide and slow. She paused an inch inside the threshold. Wiry muscle shifted and adjusted beneath an athletic top and a tight gray hoodie. Like a living knife, whipcord thin and spring-loaded. Palms open to show us empty hands. Tattoos climbed her throat. Flint-hard shards of rock peered out from gaunt sockets. Amy Stack, the ex-cult assassin, nodded her shaved head in greeting. Morel, Haynes. She made eye contact with me and Rain in turn, slow and steady and utterly expressionless. Then Nicole. "Detective. Slaphead. Fancy seeing you here." Rain's face split into a maniac grin. She shifted her footing and slid a hand inside her coat. "How's the arm?" "Hey," I said no. "Violence." Nicole stood up, eyes on Rain's covert hand. And close the door, please. My body made it hard to focus. The ghost echo of iron scales and toxic defenses quivered up my back. Amy Stack terrified me on an animal level, because in a way she really was a little bit like Rain, minus any compassion. She was a predator, a pure thing, and the memory of the abyss responded in kind. I almost lunged out of my chair, gripped by an insane urge to hiss at her with a mouthful of fangs I didn't possess. Stack stared not at Rain and her obvious threat but at me. Scared of me? I managed. Huh, Stack grunted. Hey, shite-eater, I asked you a question, Rain repeated, still grinning. Not Heather, you don't even get to look at her. Look at me. Slowly, unconcerned, Stack blinked back to Rain. In answer, she glanced down at her right arm, raised it slowly and rotated the wrist. Her broken bone had fully healed since last time we'd met. Detective, I said, trying to distract myself from the phantom limbs, the tentacles in my head. Are you in on this? No, Nicole answered. Like I said, she approached me last night. My dog hated her, which is always a bad sign. You have a knife, Stack said to Rain. Good eyes, Rain purred back. If you draw it, Stack said, or rush me, I'll run away. Rain laughed. Oh yeah? Sounds like a pretty good incentive to rush you then. Rain twitched, the very beginning of the motion to draw her knife and drive Stack away. Stack shifted 1 foot back, about to flee. No. I shot to my feet. No, Rain, wait. They both stopped. A pair of barely domesticated predators caught before a territorial fight. Rain eased off but stepped half in front of me. I looked Stack right in the eyes, swallowed and sweated, struggled to organize my words. Stack didn't relax at all. She stared back at me. You could have called us if you have something to discuss, I said. You have Rain's phone number. I seriously doubt you're reckless enough to make an assassination attempt in the middle of a hospital, without backup, in earshot of 2 police officers, who you'd also have to kill. A tilt of her head, the smallest nod. Which means this is a show of good faith, I concluded. From you? From my boss. Edward Lilburn. Alexander's uncle. Lozzie's uncle, the one she'd fled outside to hide from. The old man I'd glimpsed so many months ago in the underground car park. The organizer behind the Sharrowford cult, splintered off after I'd murdered Alexander, but before the eye's corruption. Your boss wants a sucking chest wound too, I can arrange that, said Rain. Stack ignored her, spoke to me. I'm here to set up a meeting. My boss wants to talk. To Evelyn Say, and yourself. A meeting. Stack nodded, that barely perceptible tilt of her head. To discuss what? She stared, empty and cold. Rain laughed. You could at least try to be subtle about setting a trap, you know. Subterfuge 101, don't stand there giving the game away. Not a trap. In a public place dash. Like last time you invited me to a little talk. I snapped at her, surprised by the depth of my scorn. Phantom limbs tried to reach out, wrap her head in crushing tentacles, shove her away. I shuddered. Like that coffee shop. Like then. She shook her head slowly, blinked slowly, sighed slowly, exaggerating the care in every motion. Keep us calm, no sudden movements. You choose the public place. You choose the day, the time. You get there first or don't, your choice, and then tell us the location. We'll tell you the route we'll take, you can watch us approach from a mile away, make sure we don't deviate. You bring whoever and whatever you want, as long as you come to talk, not to fight. She raised her eyebrows, as if admitting a point. Bring Zheng, if you can keep it under control. Sounds like a square deal to me, Nicole muttered. Rain turned her head, raised an eyebrow at me without letting Stack out of her peripheral vision. I shrugged, lost, my mind racing to keep it under wraps that Jing, our most potent weapon, had not returned from the countryside. You boss has this all figured out, huh? Rain asked. Edward is a very methodical man. And what do you care, huh? Rain tilted her head one way, then the other, made it obvious how she was sizing up Stack. Show of good faith, or not, why put yourself in harm's way? What's Eddie boy got on you? Pays me a great deal of money. Oh yeah? How much? More than you can afford. Stop it, both of you. Stop sparring, I said. What if we refuse the meeting? Shrug. Nicole raised a hand. Look, I'm on the sidelines here, I know. But I suspect, just from having watched, mafia movies and stuff, that refusal means they escalate anyway. Am I right? Stack didn't bother to look at her. What's so important it has to be done in person? Rain asked. Except a trap, that's one I can think of. I'm not meant to say, Stack said. Come off it, you slaphead. Rain rocked back on her heels and put her hands on her hips. She dialed down the threat posture, but still vibrated with explosive potential. You gotta give us something. Stack's eyes gave nothing away, cold and blank as lead. She looked past us and lingered on Sarika's hunched back as she huddled and panted into a pillow. The last of Alexander's experiment can't get out of her hospital bed. Stack turned back to me. Waited. Her gaze spoke volumes. You're supposed to be the smart one, Heather. Figure this out. Power vacuum, I said. There's a power vacuum in Sharrowford now. There is. Huh, there is, yeah, Rain added. And your boss wants what to fill it? He wants a truce, Stack said. Edward and his associates, say, and yourself, one or two other interested parties. The invitation is also extended to the detective, as an observer. She nodded sideways at Nicole, and got a surprised blink in return. A conference, a treaty. Power sharing in Sharrowford. Before the vultures and rats move in. Heather? Rain asked, deferring to me, to my leadership. For a moment I had no idea what to do. I didn't want to deal with Stack for a single moment longer than absolutely necessary. A small mewling part of myself said reject this, reject it and hide, get this monster out of your sight, as far away from you as possible, right now. Cold abyssal logic whispered do it, say yes. Keep these people in plain sight, get them squared away into a position they can't hurt you. Set your own trap. Kill them all. What other interested parties? I asked instead, trying to overrule my competing instincts. The people in Brinkwood. Your werewolf friend. And why did you come to the house? On the morning of the, when. Why were you at Bar End Road, waiting in your car? Stack tilted her chin down. A silent thank you. I did ask that question too, Nicole said. About the house on Bar End Road. I am a professional, it's drilled into me. She was observing a gathering of a rival group, getting intel. Made sense to me, at least. You have no way of verifying that, Stack said before Rain or I could jump in. Doesn't explain why you came to our home, Rain said. Before the power vacuum had formed. Twill chased you off, didn't she? Not a fan of big dogs, eh? She grinned a nasty grin. Not particularity. Stop avoiding the question, slaphead. Stack ignored her, waited for me. Answer the question, I said. A show of good faith. Stack nodded, gave in. My boss had instructed me to verify Evelyn Say's condition. And kill her if you could, I filled in the rest. Stack did not answer. Stack pulled the first ever pained face I'd seen from her, if one did not count the carefully controlled gasp of agony after Preem had broken her arm in that coffee shop. A frown with her brow, a curl of the lips, almost a wrinkle to her nose. On her it was practically a grimace. Okay, sure, say we believe all this. Rain spread her arms. Why aren't we making this truce with you, right now? Why can't we hash this out here? Because I'm not a negotiator. Because Evelyn Say isn't in this room. She let out a big sigh and raised her eyebrows. Because Edward wants this to work. A pub, he. Rain nodded. You know, that's not bad idea. Evelyn's right eye twitched. She'd been shouting for almost 10 minutes, started with white-faced disbelief, built pressure through hot anger, working herself up into a good head of steam. She looked as if she might burst a blood vessel. Rain wasn't the real target. Evie, I protested. She ignored me. I was the only one sitting, pulled up close to the kitchen table while Evelyn stomped back and forth and Rain made 4 cups of tea. Lozzie hung on the back of my chair, lazy arms over my shoulders. The noise of the argument had drawn her downstairs but she seemed unconcerned, nuzzling the back of my head and blinking slow sleepy eyes at Evelyn's rant. Preem stood by the closed door to Evelyn's magical workshop, comfortable and silent in her ostentatious maid uniform. Dusk had not yet fallen, but cold wind whipped tongues of heavy rain against the windows and roof. The heating was working overtime. We have spent months, and blood and sweat and tears, Evelyn slammed the tip of her walking stick against the ground, to drive these vermin out of the city, and now you want to invite them back. Hey, they made the invitation for a chat, not me. Rain spread her arms, almost laughing. Rain. I already know where we stand, Evelyn barked. In Sharrowford. And they do not. Then tell them. Tell them to get on their collective bike and hump it. Why are you so set on this? Evelyn boggled at her. Am I speaking Latin? Do you not hear the words coming out of my mouth? This is a trap. It cannot be anything dash. Evie, hey, I'm not set on anything. Rain smiled wide. And confident, a soothing smile. If I gotta be honest, I don't think we should all go ourselves. She glanced at me for a second. Just send Preem, do it remote, something like that. I refuse, Preem intoned. See. Evelyn swung an arm at Preem. Even the demon knows how phenomenally stupid you are, and she's less than 6 months old. Evie. This time, I raised my voice, then flinched as she whirled on me. Evie, you're not actually angry with Rain. Stop shouting at her, please. Evelyn opened her mouth to bite, to snap, to heap scorn upon my head then stopped dead. I wasn't the real target of her anger either, and she knew so. Oh, give me that bloody tea, she grumbled, and slumped down into a chair. Rain placed the mug of tea in front of Evelyn like a bloodied haunch of meat before a lion. Evelyn ignored it, crossed her arms, and stared at her mobile phone. 10 minutes ago she'd flung it at the tabletop in frustration, almost cracked the screen. Lozzie disentangled herself from the back of my chair and slid into the one next to me. She settled her head onto her arms on the table, and promptly fell asleep, snoring softly. Here, Rain murmured, and set down cups of tea for Lozzie and I as well. She'd added plenty of milk and sugar for Lozzie, though her tea would likely go untouched until cold. Idiot mongrel hasn't exactly left me with much choice, Evelyn hissed, staring at the phone. Evie, it's okay to care about Twill's safety. Neither I nor Rain will tease you for that. I looked quickly at Rain, made sure she wasn't about to undermine my words with a laugh or a smirk. She hid her mouth behind her own mug of tea. Good enough. She's invincible, Evelyn said. What's to care about? She fell silent, then sighed when nobody offered a riposte. She picked up her tea and took a long sip. The Brinkwood cult, the Church of Hringewindla, Twill's family they'd accepted Edward Lilburn's invitation. Twill had just called Evelyn to inform us, and for her trouble she had received an earful of creative insults. Not her fault she'd called right after we'd broken the news to Evelyn. Also not her fault that Evelyn cared about her. Twice in the last week, Twill had found excuses to visit us. First to welcome me back with a big hug, to hang out over biscuits and tea, and to swap video games with Rain. The second visit had served purely to irritate Evelyn. Rain and I knew they'd been talking, by phone and text message, but I encouraged as little intervention as my curiosity could stand. Let them work it out on their own. Instead, they'd hung around in the kitchen, spent nearly 45 minutes on the edge of an argument about nothing, then finally gone upstairs to watch one of Evelyn's favorite anime shows together. Door open, Evelyn in chair, Twill sitting on the bed. Twill had nodded off. Evelyn had been less than impressed. A start, at least. Twill's phone call had probably ruined that, for now. Evelyn thumped her tea back down. When you went to talk to this Sarika woman, I didn't expect you to come back with much, but I certainly didn't predict one of the most stupid plans I've ever heard. At least Sarika is out of the picture. Evelyn swallowed, a bitter taste in her mouth. Are you absolutely sure the detective isn't in on this? Yes, I said. I think I trust her. You think? You think? Evelyn shook her head. She's too clever by half. Doesn't understand what she's getting herself into. We are not walking into a bloody stupid trap, not again. Evie, I really don't think it's a trap. Evelyn glared at me. All right. All right, explain your reasoning. Go on, I want to hear this. It better be good. I traps our stack wasn't lying when she called Edward a methodical man. She's a sociopath. She probably lies as easily as breathe. That's not what I meant. I groped for the words, wished I could curl up and hide, armor myself in spines and plates. Instead I sat up as best I could. I mean that we've already observed it's true. He's always been so careful, he won't even speak to you over the phone in case you can hurt him somehow. Grand theatrical gestures, that was Alexander's style. If this man was going to lay a trap, I think he'd do it so quietly, so covertly, that we'd never know it was him. He certainly wouldn't telegraph his responsibility. What she said, yeah. Rain raised a toast to me with her mug. Also because Rain is a very competent judge of danger, I said to Evelyn. If she thought this was dangerous, she wouldn't be going along with it at all, no matter what decision I've made. Ouch. Rain mock winced and put a hand over her heart. Evelyn snorted and shook her head. And Rain's never gotten this wrong before. Never put you in danger. That's not fair. Come on, I'm hardly a professional, Rain said. Mid-market cowboy contractor at best. Why are you so set on it then, Heather? Evelyn tapped the tabletop. You've seen what these people have done, over and over. You of all people should know dash. Exactly, I snapped. Evelyn blinked at me, but I raced on. Because we need to make a deal, Evelyn. Because I need to get you to the library in Carcosa, so you can raid it for knowledge. Because I need to fix whatever's happened to Lozzie, get her outside. I need my friends, all of you, safe. Because I need to find Zheng and I don't know where to start. Because I refuse to spend another 3 months of limited time dealing with another cult. Because I need to focus on saving my sister. Nobody spoke when I stopped. Rain pounded the windows and roof. Wind whistled through gaps in loose tiles. Focus, Preem intoned. I swallowed and looked down. The anger receded as quickly as it had taken me. I'm sorry, I have to focus on Maisie. I know I'm not the only one here, my problems aren't the center of the world. If you want, I can dash. Evelyn cleared her throat awkwardly. She wet her lips, cast about for the right words, rubbed her forehead. If you really don't think it's a trap, perhaps I should trust your judgment. We can make sure it's not a trap, Rain said. Serious? I nodded. That's what I mean, I don't think we should blunder in. We'll use an actual public place. We'll go in numbers. You and me, Rain, Preem. Probably best not to take Lozzie, or Kimberly. Twill and her side, will be there, and they're at least sympathetic to us. The detective too, she'll be like a tripwire, any violence and the mundane world sits up and takes notice. And, I swallowed hard. Say it, cold abyssal logic whispered. Say it. Heather, Evelyn said, quiet and serious. This happened once before. When this stack woman approached you in the library. Hey, Evie. Rain started. Shut up, Rain, you're incapable of this part. Evelyn said. Her eyes searched mine. Heather, you said no to coexistence then, on moral grounds, because of what the cult did. Because of the killings, the kidnappings, the children you found in that castle. You felt very strongly about that. Very strongly indeed. I nodded. Yes, I remember, I still do, but dash. But. Exactly. I agreed with you then. I still do now. Say it. But dash. Damn it, Heather, Evelyn snapped. You've been trying to show me that some decisions don't have to be made. That magic doesn't mean I have to be like Dash. But we should set a trap of our own, I said. Heather. Rain raised an impressed eyebrow. Evelyn paused, rapt with attention. A magical one, I explained. That's your job, Evie. Either we have this truce, we make a deal one we can approve of, or we kill them all in a single trap, and it's done with. Cold abyssal memory whispered to me. Lay the trap, lay in wait, kill them all regardless. Make this bolt hole safe for you, for your friends. Remove the threat. You're serious, Evelyn said. I shook my head, uncomfortable, my skin crawling. Don't be surprised, please. This uncle, Lozzie's uncle, I wish we could ask her more about him, but Dash, I glanced down at Lozzie, dozing on the table. Her eyes were open. Staring at nothing. Blank gaze, puppet with her strings cut. Lozzie. She let out a string of mumbles, sleep talk nonsense, then her voice cohered into actual words, can't let him get me. Please, please, please. Heather, please. I won't. Lozzie, I won't. I promise. I put a hand on her head, stroked her hair. She lapsed back into mumbles, then closed her eyes again. Quite, Evelyn grunted. That's the other reason we try to make a deal, I said. He stops looking for Lozzie. I get space and time to find my sister. Part of any deal has to be no more kidnappings. None. No preying on the weak. I knew I was trying to convince myself, but I still said the words. Didn't quite work. Perhaps this Edward Lilburn is behind the force keeping you and Lozzie from going outside, Evelyn said. I nodded. That's what I was thinking too. Maybe. Except for the thing in Glasswick Tower perhaps, and we can't deal with that alone. Evelyn scooped up her phone off the table, hesitated, then pressed the redial button and held it up to her ear. Rain edged away from her and mimed a mock duck-and-cover routine. I sipped my tea. The call connected. You, Evelyn said. Yes, it's me again, no, STTW, Twill, shut up. We're in. A pause. I caught a snatched word from the other end. Yes, we'll pick the place, Evelyn continued. How many of you will there be? All right. I want you to call me back, no, I want your mother to call me back, or your father, or whoever else is in charge, once they've decided on a plan. Then I want you to call me as well, and share anything they didn't tell me, any suspicions they're planning a trick, or a setup, or anything else. You tell me. Understand? Good. Later. She ended the call and slapped the phone back down on the table. Well, that's her. Told. Evie, she's your friend, Rain said with a sigh and a grin. She's trying. She's a bloody liability, that's what she is. Evelyn huffed. But I like this idea of a trap. I suspected you might, I said. But we should only use it if we can't make a deal. We have to try. I can't just surrender to the abyssal logic, the cold needs of pure survival. Evelyn gave me a sharp look. We need to find Zheng. They'll expect her with us. Her absence raises questions, makes us look weak. Yes. I winced and resisted the urge to bow my head with guilt. Yes, I know. She is your responsibility, Heather. You freed her. I know. What am I supposed to do? I shrugged, swallowing past a lump in my throat. Stand out in the back garden and call her name, like a runaway dog. Go camping and hope she catches my scent. I don't have some kind of psychic connection to her. I don't even know where she is. Sleeping in trees, eating wild animals, Rain said with an approving grin. Probably having a grand old time. Until she decides to come back, Evelyn said. And I for one would prefer she does so before she forgets how to act like a human being. I sighed and nodded, knew I had to do something but had no idea what. Apparently there was no magic to locate a stray demon, and hyperdimensional mathematics was still out, too sore, a slow-healing wound. I raised my eyes and looked through the kitchen window, into the shadows of the back garden. No solace there. Tenny's cocoon hung in the tree, huge and gravid, washed by the rain, swaying with the wind. Of course, only Preem, Lozzie, and I could see the damn thing. I'd been seeing it all week. Big as a car, wedged between the top branches to keep it in place, anchored to the ground and tree trunk with long sticky strips of Pneuma-Somatic flesh. The cocoon's surface was a liquid tarry black, forever shifting and flowing, just as Tenny's flesh had. Her metamorphosis was taking a very, very long time indeed. For a while I'd entertained the idea that she'd died in there, that the poor spirit didn't have the energy to complete her poorly defined transformation, but a few days ago I'd ventured out, gotten close to the cocoon. Hadn't even needed to touch the thing. I'd felt a heartbeat stir the air, a deep bass thrum of life running through the sticky black cocoon as I'd stood under the tree. Preem followed my gaze and turned her head to look as well. Overdue, she intoned. Yes, quite overdue indeed, I agreed. Evelyn and Rain shared a glance. They knew it was there, but they couldn't see it. Whatever gestated inside, faithful Tenny or not, I'd feel a lot more comfortable with Zheng close at hand when it emerged. Striking a deal with Edward Lilburn would also go much smoother if I had a big stick to hand, and I could think of no bigger stick than Zheng. In the end we chose a pub. Well, Rain did. The Bricklayer's Arms was located on Sharrowford's eastern edge, where the buildings thinned out. For a brief moment the city could convince itself it wasn't a post-industrial hulk wrapped in a curtain of decay. Close enough to the university to feel like home turf, but far enough from home to count as neutral territory. Back toward the city, one could spy snatches of university spire or blunt brutalist concrete on the horizon, beyond the semi-detached houses set in generous but bare gardens. In the other direction, copses of trees huddled against the late winter cold. Dank dripping hedgerows wound across the landscape as Sharrowford ran out, and the countryside began. Secluded check. The pub boasted a large open garden in the rear, beer garden with optimistically clean tables, limp sunshade umbrellas, and lots of elbow room. It backed onto an empty field that served as a campsite, separated by a gravel path mostly gone to mud. In summer, campers would provide much of the pub's income, but this time of year the campground was empty, patchworked with weeds and thistles. No angle for a surprise approach check. Proximity to the university supplied a steady flow of students, but also meant the Bricklayer's Arms never quite managed to fly the lofty heights of the middle-class gastropub it so dearly wanted to be. Students got rowdy, smoked weed, drank heavily, talked politics and philosophy and other subjects one wasn't meant to discuss over a meal. The pub saw plenty of patrons, but not families, nobody out in the leafy garden for a pub lunch. Public enough to discourage open violence, double check, but not too many prying eyes, check. Told you it was perfect, hey? Rain murmured. As we emerged from the warm dark confines of the pub itself, out through the back door, she turned to us and spread her hands in a gesture of presentation. Our only human observers were a trio of day-drinking math students, hunched under the pointless sunshades around a growing clutter of empty beer glasses and cigarette butts, talking loudly about something called the Riemann hypothesis. Only one of them bothered to look our way, a striking young woman with dyed green hair. Her eyes slid off Preem, thwarted. Normal people. Still would have preferred campus, Evelyn said. Busy, Preem intoned. She obviously did not mean the pub. Rain thumbed at her in agreement. I'm with Preem on that one. Campus would be way too busy. Yes, it'll do. I suppose. It's nice, I managed, trying to ignore the caterpillars gnawing at my guts. Heather, you're too sweet for your own good. Rain laughed gently. The Bricklayers is a shithole. Somebody got glassed here 3 weeks ago. Got what? I'm sorry, what? But Rain was already thumbing over her shoulder. Nobody ever sits down the back, it's too cold and too far from the bar. Come on. We took the pair of tables all the way at the bottom of the garden, where it opened out onto the empty campsite. Only a few spirits lurked in the garden itself. A huge thing like a bipedal hippo was slouched over one of the tables, and something with too many spindle-like legs crouched atop the pub's roof, but beyond, plenty of Pneuma-Somatic life slithered and crawled, chittered and chattered. A pulsating mass of tendrils like a rooted plant stood out in the campground, and several creatures like crosses between chimpanzees and bats stalked in small packs across the open countryside beyond. A few glanced at me. None lingered, even when I looked back. It had taken me over a week to notice. Since I'd returned from the abyss, spirit life gave me a wider berth. Didn't know how to feel about that. I didn't exactly have the emotional bandwidth to think about it much, wasn't complaining, not yet. Oh, you weren't exaggerating, it is cold here, I said, bunkered down inside my hoodie and coat as I went to sit at the wooden table. A stand of gnarled oak trees ran all the way down the length of the property and the field beyond. They blocked the worst of the wind, but February wasn't over yet. I looked back up the length of the garden and a sigh escaped my lips. The pub itself was a whitewashed brick and beam structure, real rustic, practically pre-rustic. Probably been here longer than the city, its predecessors sinking into the clay for millennia. The thatch roof must have cost a small fortune in upkeep. Tiny lead-lined windows peered out into the garden like the eyes of a wizened old woman. The brief moments we'd spent inside as we'd crossed to the garden had been a wonder of dark wood stained by decades of tobacco smoke, a wide bar worn smooth by years of hands and elbows, odd paintings and photographs of local landscapes on the walls, and a tantalizing hint of an upper story of creaking floorboards. The whole place looked lopsided, slouched with age and weight. I'd much rather conduct this meeting inside. At least then I'd have some beauty to dampen my nerves. Wait, hold your horses. Evelyn gestured at me to stop before my backside touched the seat, then pulled 2 small folded towels out of her bag. She handed one to me. For sitting. These bench seats stay damp forever, you'll get piles. Ah. I nodded and got settled in. The towel did indeed provide a buffer between my delicate bum and the damp wood. Evelyn took the seat to my left, while Rain just rested the heel of one boot on the edge to my right, too alert to sit down. Preem had carried a heavy sports bag all the way from home, and now she placed it in the seat next to Evelyn. Then she stepped back, clasped her hands in front of her, and stood stock still. I tried as best I could to ignore the tiny rustling sounds from inside the bag. You gonna take it out? Rain asked. Rain cleared her throat and barely suppressed a smirk. Point. Evelyn whacked the top of the bag with her walking stick. The rustling noises stopped. Maybe I should. Let it loose now and get this over with. I closed my eyes and forced a deep breath. Evie, only if we have to. We have to try first. Evelyn huffed and grit her teeth, but she nodded. Rain's hand found the top of my head. Gently, she ruffled my hair. "'S like we're really in the mafia, huh?" she mused. 2:05, she announced, checking the time on her mobile phone. 5 minutes till first arrival. You three all right here on your own for a sec? I'm fine, I lied. Preem's here. Here, Preem said. No, Evelyn deadpanned. The moment you look away from us, we'll vanish, explode, and be replaced by identical doppelgangers. Yes, Rain, we'll be fine. Go keep the staff off us. Stick to the plan. Stick to the plan, I echoed. Sticking to the plan, yes ma'am, yes ma'am. Rain mock saluted, then marched off back to the pub, to order drinks and a few packets of crisps to keep the staff from bothering us too much. Nothing suspicious back here, not at all, just a big bunch of friends and family gathering for a drink on a cold, gray day, at the end of a dreary damp garden. Don't stray too close, you might hear some strange things. The plan was simple. Potentially brutal. Very few moving parts. Little to go wrong. In theory. Evelyn had sent Preem here alone this morning, before sunrise, ahead of the rest of us. She'd placed wards at 5 equidistant points around the property, the campsite field, and the surrounding 3 streets. The fractal, cut into the bark of trees, graffitied onto back alley walls, hidden in the refuse of abandoned scrub ground, we now sat at the center of a giant protective pentagram. Nowhere near as strong as the much older wards on Evelyn's house and the medieval metaphysics room, a temporary measure which sapped a great deal of Preem's concentration. The spell would alert her to any spirits or more importantly, servitors which crossed the boundary. If this was a trap, if we didn't like what we heard, if we couldn't extract a satisfactory agreement out of Edward Lilburn, Evelyn would speak a trigger word in Latin inimicus which Rain and I had also memorized. The thing in the bag would hear that word, through bin liner and towel and tin foil, and it would wake. It would memorize the faces and sense Evelyn told it to, then scamper off into the countryside for 2 weeks to grow strong. Then it would hunt. But first, we would try to talk. Civilized discussion, reasonable debate, compromise. That was what would happen here, I told myself, we would not need to spring our trap. Everything was going to be okay. Ugly, but okay. This is what I'm supposed to be good at. I'm the sensible one, aren't I? Rain hurts people and makes threats. Evelyn does magic and knows things. Me? Somehow I'd slipped into a natural leadership role. Because I struck compromise, because I stopped people hurting each other, because I made deals. Or at least I had, before the abyss. Instinct fed me contradictory impulses. Phantom limbs urged to me to flee, to hide, to lie in wait with spring-loaded claws and razor-sharp teeth I did not possess. To tear open the sports bag and dump the contents onto the table to establish dominance when our adversaries arrived. To scuttle home and curl up in the dark with Lozzie. I did none of those things. I sat quietly and sipped an orange juice Rain bought me, trying to act like a person. Almost exactly 4 minutes and 30 seconds later, a short, athletic-looking blonde lady in a long dark coat strolled into the pub garden. She spotted us and walked over. At first I didn't recognize her. I felt my hackles rise, an animal hiss in my throat, a desire to paint myself with threat warning and toxic sweat. Rain raised a hand in greeting. Right on time, detective. Oh, Nikki, I said, blinking. Hello. Never know what you can find out if you're on time, Nicole said. Afternoon, you lot, Rain, Heather, Evelyn, Preem. Right. And not so much with the titles today, please. I'm off duty. She shot us all a broad wink, looked Preem up and down, then took a deep breath of the cold air and glanced around the garden. Interesting choice of venue. Her clothes weren't too different: jeans and a ribbed gray cardigan instead of a suit, the coat a touch more functional rather than the austere black she'd worn on the job, lots of pockets, a pair of curb stomper boots on her feet. She had her hair up in a ponytail, freed from the usual iron-hard bun. No makeup, no jewelry, practical and serious. None of that added up to why I hadn't recognized Nicole. She was off-duty in more than the way she meant. Not only had she shed the institutional armor of her suit, she'd shed her authority too. In its place stood something else, a quiet cunning, an understated alertness. If by interesting you mean shithole, sure, Rain said. Some poor bugger got glassed in the face here recently, right? Right. Nicole laughed and shook her head. I'll go get a drink then. Keep a seat warm for me, yeah. She returned with a pint and a packet of crisps a minute later, debated silently, then crossed to our side of the table and sat one space down from Rain. She opened her crisps, crunched loudly, then noticed the way we were all looking at her. What? She asked. Am I the only one drinking? Rain smirked. I'd rather keep a clear head, for the moment. I don't really drink, I said. That's a lie, by the way, Evelyn added. She drinks vodka with Rain on occasion. They make an awful lot of noise, even more insufferable than usual. Evelyn eyed the detective's pint. Rain has a point though. We're at the pub, Nicole said with a shrug. Which means no fighting, no mucking about, no hard feelings. You are frighteningly naive, detective. Maybe. That's why I'm here though, isn't it? Can't exactly be a neutral party if I've got no idea what you wizards and monsters are actually up to. She raised her pint in a solitary toast to Evelyn, and got a frowning glare in return. Where's the other woman, anyway? The cute little redhead? Kimberly. Evelyn frowned. Kim stayed at home, I answered. This would have terrified her, and she doesn't want to be involved in magic anymore. It wouldn't be fair. Oh. Oh, right. Well. Nicole settled down in her coat, a little put out, then smirked as an idea occurred to her. What about the giant? Couldn't fit her in your car? Zheng, I swallowed, caught a side-eyed look from Evelyn. Zheng would be too conspicuous. Nicole laughed. Yes, she would be, no joke there. She took a sip from her pint. The truth was far messier. We couldn't find Zheng, and the failure had been eating at me for days. Rain and I had gone over the local newspapers from Sharrowford and nearby, searched for reports of mutilated cattle or news of the weird about odd countryside sightings, big cats loose on the moors, that sort of thing. A sheep corpse gutted and partially consumed here, a missing cow there, an old woman who'd heard booming laughter from over a hillside west of the city, a farmer to the north who swore blind that one night he'd seen a 10-foot shadow fighting an angry ram. We'd stuck virtual pins on Google Maps to establish a pattern, but there wasn't one. If Zheng was out there, she was all over the place. Nicole gestured with her pint glass. What you got in the bag there? A dead rabbit, said Evelyn. Nicole blinked and looked at the bag again. It was twitching. Evelyn reached over and whacked it with the head of her walking stick. That's not a joke, I said with a sigh. A dead rabbit, wrapped in a bin liner and tinfoil and reanimated. It's disgusting. Wizard shit, said Rain. Right. Nicole smiled, drank a mouthful of beer, and sat back in her chair. Wizard shit. Say no more. Guilt fought with survival instinct. We'd already agreed, Rain and Evelyn and I, that nobody else needed to know about the trap. It wasn't like a bomb or sudden violence. It couldn't, hurt Nicole or Twill or anybody else that Evelyn didn't point it at. But didn't they have a right to know? It might go wrong, might not prevail, might make this shadow war worse. They'd all be accomplices by association. Cold logic said no, they might disagree, and then you'd lose your shot at Edward Lilburn. One, Preem suddenly announced. Only one. Evelyn snapped, but didn't wait for an answer. Heather, you keep your eyes open. Spot it before it's overhead. I'm watching, yes. One what? Nicole asked. One servitor, Evelyn answered. Twill's lot. The Church of Hringewindla turned up right on cue. 5 people including Twill, 1 dog, and no surprises. We'd organized it over the phone, made sure we both knew exactly who and how many would attend. No surprises meant no excuses for what Rain would call an itchy trigger finger. Hey, guys. Twill strode ahead of the others in her awful clashing lime green coat and white hoodie, beaming at us as she trotted forward. Twill, hello. I managed a smile, then resumed scanning the air for the unseen 7th member of their group, hoping it wasn't somehow crammed inside the dog. I hadn't thought of that, and well, it sounds absurd, but my life is a constant parade of absurdity. Rain said hi. Nicole raised her pint and muttered something that sounded like, bloody werewolf. Evie, hey, Twill started. After this, you wanna dash? Sit down. But dash. Sit down, Evelyn barked. The sooner you sit, the sooner Rain can make the call, and we can get this over with. Evelyn's gaze snapped away from Twill to take in the other 4 who drew up around her. I dash, Twill stammered. Yeah, I mean, that's cool, I dash. 2 I didn't recognize, a man and woman, though I knew exactly who they were. The woman had a dog on a leash, a large and friendly-looking golden retriever to which I took an immediate gut-level liking. A good dog. The other 2 I already knew. Twill's mother had visited the house before, on the ill-fated afternoon before our trip to Alexander's castle. Her bodyguard, Twill's cousin, was attending as well, a 6-foot slab of muscle and fat by the name of Benjamin, with a doughy face and a slightly more impressive scratch of beard than last time. He stopped by the corner of the table and folded his arms, playing the tough guy. Rain winked at him with a smirk. He glowered back, performatively grumpy. He wasn't their real protection. Neither was Twill, an angelically pretty teenage girl who could probably bend steel with her bare hands and sprint at 30 miles an hour. Their real bodyguard was the disgusting mass of near-invisible spheres which bobbed in the air about 20 feet up. Soap bubbles, ranging in size from pinhead to human head, translucent except for a sheen of Pneuma-Somatic ichor. The bubbles slid over each other, rearranged in a constant effort of locomotion, adjusting itself through the air as if on self-laid tracks. I see the servitor, I said out loud. Preem. Yes, she. Agreed, watching it too. You keep that clear of us, you hear? Evelyn raised her voice. Or I'll have Preem kill it. The woman I didn't recognize nodded her head. She rolled her eyes back for a moment and pressed her hands together as if praying. The glugging bubble spirit stopped a good distance from the table. I'll leave it on overwatch, is this acceptable? She asked, voice a breathy sing-song. Evelyn glanced at me. Keep it there, please, I said. Miss Say, it's lovely to see you well. Twill's mother said. Christine Hopton was Twill but 30 years older, the same sharp features and dark hair, softened by crow's feet, a warm smile, and a twinkle in her eyes. Right now she looked like she'd been dredged up from a misremembered 1969, dressed in a tie-dyed poncho and a shawl against the cold. When I'd first met her, I'd rather liked her, until I'd seen what lay behind her eyes. I had to remind myself that all these people carried a passenger inside their skulls. You as well, Heather, and Rain. Christine nodded to us, inclined her head to Preem, then glanced at Nicole. But I don't think I've met you before, so you must be our, ahem, she cleared her throat gently, friend from the police force. Police, Benjamin muttered, tutaying and shaking his head. That's me. Nicole raised her pint in a jovial greeting. Nicole Webb. You gonna introduce us, werewolf? Twill suddenly looked stuck. This is, my mum. She's Christine Hopton, Evelyn almost growled. High Priestess, into the garden. Every passing car made my heart rate spike. 3 times I craned around to look over my shoulder, into the empty campsite field. My shoulder blades itched, my skin crawled, my eyeballs ached. My whole body cried out for change, weak and vulnerable and about to face dangerous predators. I was too weak, it whispered. I needed spines and claws and rending teeth. This was not how one dealt with predators. I required protection. Somehow, rain was not enough, not for what I'd brought back from the abyss. I spotted Stack before she saw us. She emerged from the back door of the pub, a knife slash wrapped in a gray hoodie and lightweight raincoat. Her eyes found us in a fraction of a second, found me, but I saw her first. The psychological edge was intoxicating. I'm faster than you, part of me whispered. She walked across the garden, wound her way around empty tables and folded sunshades, slow and casual. Rain let go of my hand, straightened up, and radiated silent threat. Conversation died away. Stack took her hands out of her pockets to show us empty palms. When Stack reached our table, she paused to lock eyes with Rain. Unspoken communication passed between them, body language and micro-expression. Then she sat down opposite us. I struggled to control my breathing, felt sweat on my back and under my arms, heart thudding against my ribcage. Stack shrugged, barely lifting her shoulders. This is her? Evelyn asked. You're Amy Stack. Stack looked Evelyn in the eye, cold and relaxed. Evelyn glared back. Twill, off to one side, bared her teeth in a sudden rising growl. Twill, dear, please, Christine Hopton said. We're all here to talk. You tried to kill me, Evelyn murmured to Stack. No, Stack replied. I didn't try. Twill growled louder. Evelyn's anger, her front, her scowl, failed to cover what lay beneath. Her hands gripped her walking stick with white-knuckle tension. The pieces fell into place. I'd been so blind. Too wrapped up in myself. On the morning after Glasswick Tower, the only thing between Evelyn and a quick death at this woman's hands had been Twill. Kimberly had been present in the house too, at least before Lozzie turned up, but I very much doubted either of them would have been capable of running Stack off, let alone stopping her. Twill had chosen to stay, and in that act she'd saved Evelyn's life, perhaps more so than the rest of us had with Felicity's spell. No wonder Evelyn hadn't dealt with her feelings for Twill. Evie, proud and bitter, admitting vulnerability and fear to Twill. She probably couldn't even say thank you, not in the way that mattered. They weren't being stereotypical useless lesbians at all. And now, here was the rematch. Twill was going to take Stack's head off, in public, for Evelyn, unless somebody stopped them. Preem. I turned in my seat and caught the doll demon's gaze. In a minor miracle, she understood perfectly what I needed. Preem stepped forward, neat and precise, to Evelyn's shoulder. She made the very beginning of a reaching motion with one hand, not even a quarter of the way complete, halting before it even really began. Stack broke off, visibly suppressed a flinch in her right arm. Twill stopped growling. Evelyn broke into an evil smile. Your body recalls that one, does it? She hissed. I should know, I was watching through Preem's eyes when she broke your arm. Stack leaned back and nodded once with that tiny tilt of her head. An admission of defeat, of a point scored. She cast her eyes across everyone present, then settled back on me. She didn't even need to say it, I saw the conclusion in her eyes, no Zheng. Her stare lingered only a moment, but I felt as if she saw right through me, read my thoughts on my face. She blinked slowly, done with me, and turned to Rain. All ready? Stack asked. Send him in, yes, get on with it, Evelyn snapped at her before Rain could reply. Stack reached inside her coat nice and slow, never once broke eye contact with Rain, and produced a mobile phone. She sent a prearranged text message with a flick of her thumb. A moment later, the back door of the pub swung open to admit 2 more people into the beer garden. 2 men. They spotted us and walked over. I didn't recognize either of them. This was getting ridiculous. Just how cautious did Edward need to be? Perhaps it was theatrical arrogance. He'd have his entourage sit down one by one, and only emerge last, the prima donna swanning onto the stage. I thought back to the old man I'd seen in the underground car park, his stringy gray hair and wireframe glasses. No, drama didn't seem his style. This was pure paranoia. I couldn't blame him for that. The man in front carried a briefcase. Maybe in his late 40s or early 50s, he had a face like a happy little pet rat, a squished smile, and big blinking eyes, his hair sticking up in little wispy tufts. A little short, portly in a comfortable sort of way, upholstered with good living and little exercise, wearing a comfortable if rumpled suit underneath a sensible, smart coat. He hurried over to us, smiling, eyes darting about to take us all in. Hello, yes, delighted to meet you all, I'm sure, he chattered. He stuck his hand out to shake at each of us one by one, but didn't actually wait for anybody to take the offer. Mrs. Hopton, Mr. Hopton, the other Mrs. Hopton, young Master Hopton, little Miss Hopton. Officer Webb. Rain, no sorry, forgot your one Miss Evelyn say of course, Miss Morel, you dash, he paused and blinked at Preem, like a hedgehog in headlights. You I don't know. That's fine, all good. I'm certain everyone who should be here is here. Yes. And with that, he sat down next to Stack. He placed his briefcase on the table and beamed at us. The second man was younger, maybe late 20s, tall and black and dressed in a far sharper suit, not a single crease about him. He greeted us all with a nod and an ironic smile. Good afternoon, ladies, gentlemen, he said, in a broad North London accent. I disliked him instantly. Reminded me too much of Alexander. Sit down, Julian, sit down. The hyperactive rat man waved an impatient hand at him. Julian is my assistant, you see, still believes in all that standing on ceremony stuff, thinks it's more important than actually getting down to brass tacks. Ichem. He made a funny little closed-mouthed titter at his own non-joke. Julian lowered himself into a seat too, nodding his head in gentle agreement. Shall we begin, then, The rat man asked, clasping his hands together. We all know what we're here for, after all, I hope. Our own little Potsdam conference, no. Except we did all the work, Evelyn almost growled. Ahem. No. He avoided her venomous glare. No laughs. Well, just one of my small jokes, a small joke. Do forgive me. All right, I've had enough of this, Rain said, shaking her head with an indulgent smile. We've got the assassin and the jester, and whatever you're meant to be, she gestured at Julian. When's Eddie Boy himself putting in an appearance? He's too paranoid, I said out loud, as it dawned on me. I'm sorry. The rat-like man blinked several times. What's wrong? Michael Hotpon asked. Sharp. I think we may have been misled, Christine said, delicately. Evelyn frowned. She pointed at the rat-faced man. This isn't him. This isn't Edward Lilburn. No, I said. No, it isn't. What? The rat man spluttered. But of course I'm not. I don't follow. Slow down, please, I dash. Where is he? Rain asked Stack. Where's your head honcho? Where's Ed Boy? Stack just stared. He's not coming, is he? I asked. It's a trap, then, Evelyn hissed between gritted teeth. She placed one hand on the sports bag. Evie. I panicked. Evie, wait. In the corner of my eye, I saw Stack switch to the bag, suddenly on and alert. This was supposed to be a straightforward meeting, Michael Hopton said, on his feet. Where's Mr. Lilburn? Please. The rat man got to his feet too, raised both hands in a placating gesture. I assure you, I am fully empowered to act and negotiate on my client's behalf, with the full force of Dash. They both talked over each other. Benjamin stood and glowered. Julian looked quite alarmed, like he wanted to get up and flee. I almost reached out and took Evelyn's hand, to stop her before it was too late. Twill looked supremely lost. For a moment all was confusion. And Nicole burst out laughing. Everyone stopped and looked at her. She shook her head in disbelief at the little rat-faced man. I thought I recognized you from somewhere. He cleared his throat, decidedly uncomfortable. Well, of course you know me, officer. I never forget a face from business, never ever. Glances were shared. Muscles relaxed. Everyone backed down though Rain and Stack stayed locked on each other. The rat-faced man took a very long breath indeed, swallowed, and wet his lips. He cast a blinking glance sideways at Stack. I do wish you people wouldn't do this to me all the bloody time. Our good friends here are unaware of the, specific arrangements. Yes, said Stack. He let out a long-suffering sigh. Julian, were you aware of this too? Please, I know you're my client's apprentice as well, but, really now? Unfortunately yes, sir. I realized with a suppressed shiver that Julian was eyeing the bag with intense curiosity. Only now did he look up and resume the mantle of well-dressed young man, and smile. Very well, we will work with what we've got. Let's start from the top, shall we? The rat-faced man pulled himself up as best he could, straightened his rumpled suit, and smiled like a pet rat getting ear scratches. My name is Harold Yulson. I am fully empowered by my client to make decisions pertaining to relations between himself and the two other parties represented here today, supposed to be three, but well, one rejection is acceptable, not inclusive of Detective Webb as a mediator and external observer. I am in the know. He made little air quotes with his fingers, as we say. That is, I know that half the people here are mages, and the other half are barely human. I myself do not practice, I am very glad to say. I am about as normal as you can get. He grinned, oddly pleased with himself about that. Rain shook her head. You pulled one over on us. Only a little, Stack replied. Who the hell are you then? Evelyn snapped at the rat-like man. A representative. A mouthpiece, Amanda Hopton said. I sighed. Exactly. Is it not obvious? Yulson asked, genuinely put out and quite worried. I almost wanted to reassure him. He was half endearing in the way a small, nervous gerbil or hamster might be. He cleared his throat and cast about for help, made several noises. I am certain they will understand, sir, Julian offered. We're all civilized people here. Yes, well, Yulson sighed, as if resigned to his lot in life. He finally managed to meet Evelyn's thunderous glower once more. Ladies and gentlemen, magicians and monsters, extra-dimensional entities and others, I am Mr. Edward Lilburn's lawyer. Harold Yulson, portly and rat-like, stood for a moment with his chin raised and his fingertips tucked into the lapels of his coat, looking off into the middle distance like a painting of some pompous 19th-century general. A lawyer, Evelyn deadpanned. An exceptionally good one, his assistant, Julian, put in. Why, thank you, Julian, Yulson said. Your confidence in me is most appreciated. It does make sense, I said. I had to force the words out, unclench my teeth with an effort of will. Anticlimax gnawed at the base of my stomach. This was wrong, not meant to be like this, not supposed to go this way. It does, doesn't it? Twill's father agreed. Of all the Hoptons, he appeared the least surprised by this turn of events, nodding and folding his arms, making a thoughtful noise as he frowned at Yulsun. Amanda looked out of her depth, uncertain of which way to turn her big blinking manic eyes, gripping her dog's leash in a tight fist. Poor Benjamin's frown would have given a Neanderthal a run for his money. Does it? Twill squinted in utter confusion. What the hell's the point of a lawyer? To talk, her dad replied. Rain was the only one who didn't react, not to Yulsun. She stared at Stack, and Stack stared back. No, Evelyn spat. No, it doesn't make sense. What does law mean to magicians? Every person here is technically a criminal, even the bloody police officer. You're about as useful as tits on a fish. Yulsun blinked like a startled vole, shocked out of his satisfaction, and crashed back down to earth with a hemming and hawing. Ahem, well, that judgment, my dear young lady, is entirely subjective. Transferable skills, you see, transferable skills. I am not here to practice law as such, but negotiation, diplomacy. Who better to grease the wheels than one who understands the nuances of compromise? Furthermore, as I am not directly involved, I have no stake in your, shall we say, special interests. He smiled an oily smile, opened his hands in a placatory gesture, and I felt the most unaccountable urge to hiss at him. The sensation clawed up my throat, irresistible animal instinct. I was so shocked I almost choked on my own saliva in an effort to hold back. A wet cough into my own mouth drew a concerned flicker from Rain, but I shook my head and waved her off. Panic settled in my chest. Hissing at a lawyer would get us nowhere, it was utterly inappropriate, straight from the imagination of a play-acting 12-year-old. The frustration was valid though. Where was Edward Lilburn? He was supposed to answer my accusations, account for the actions of the cult. Instead, he'd sent this tubby rat man. Don't let his front fool you, Nicole said. And don't agree to anything too fast. He's good at this, the sneaky little bastard. This man is a master of irritating verbal misdirection. Yulsun sketched a head bob bow at Nicole, as if accepting a compliment. He clasped his hands together and beamed at us. Well, ladies and gentlemen and others, are we all satisfied that we're going to dash? Misdirection. I bristled, felt it in the little hairs on the back of my neck and the skin up my spine, sat up as if struck by lightning. Stared at Amy Stack. Another inappropriate urge gripped my muscles in a pulse of adrenaline, and this one was plainly insane. My body wanted to leap the table and tackle her, attack her. My body was convinced I was faster, that I had a dozen barbed and hooked tentacles to drag out her eyes and lash her skin apart. I took a shuddering breath as she slowly turned her eyes from Rain to me. Rain tensed as well, read my change in posture and mirrored my readiness. Heather? Rain asked. Stack kept her hands visible, on the tabletop. No excuse for violence. If this is I swallowed, my mouth dry. If this is misdirection, while Edward snatches Lozzie dash. It's not, Stack said. Calm down. My body screamed fight. Kill her. I knew I couldn't, this was absurd, this reaction made no sense. Ah yes. Yulsun lit up like a department store Father Christmas made of rats. Miss Lauren Lilburn is, in fact, one of the issues which Edward wishes to put on the table here today. The matter of this wayward young girl does need settling, yes. I don't think she's lying, Rain murmured as she studied Stack's face. Stack blinked, said nothing, stared at me in cold silence. We'd left Lozzie as safe as possible, wrapped up in bed and fast asleep. The doors were locked, the spider servitors lay in wait, Evelyn had refreshed the older wards. Anybody who wanted to kidnap her would need to fight all the way from the door, upstairs, and into Lozzie's bedroom. Snatching an unconscious Rain from the front room in a mad suicidal dash, that was one thing, getting all that way past the spiders would be much more difficult. A rational response would be to turn to Twill, ask her to make use of her speed, run home to check on Lozzie. Or pull out my mobile phone and call the house, make sure she was safe, even though I knew she'd sleep through the ringing. A sensible, human response would be to figure out the logic or motivation behind a lie, and execute a counterplay. I didn't feel any of that. I wanted to leap onto the table and scream and pull Stack's face off. I wanted to speak the trigger word for Evelyn's trap, let it loose, and run back home. Instead I swallowed hard, forced myself to nod, tried to be human. Rain put one hand on my shoulder and squeezed. Yes, this is all above board and legitimate, Yulsun said. You have my personal promise, Miss Morel, my personal guarantee, this is not a trick, or a trap. Edward is fully aware that you are as much a player in this negotiation as Miss Say here, and also aware that any attempts to, prematurely reunite with his niece would be most unwisely dash. Sit down, Evelyn snapped. Yulsun jumped at the whip crack of her voice and all but fell into his seat. In a display of vast disdain, Evelyn then ignored him. She turned in her seat to deliver another walking stick whack to the rustling sports bag, a satisfying thwack of wood on taut fabric. Over on the other table, Benjamin stifled an appreciative laugh. Yes, quite, Yulsun said. Shall we begin properly then? I take it there are no further objections to these arrangements, or my presence. Evelyn gave him a look to fell an elephant. This is a waste of time. You are a waste of time. Rain shrugged in eloquent silence. The Hoptons murmured cautious assent, though Amanda seemed more concerned with petting Bernard's head, perhaps that's how she dealt with stress. Twill looked most uncomfortable, like she wanted to bare her teeth and solve this the easy way. I struggled to fold myself away. Whatever we'd outwardly convinced each other of, my subconscious had prepared for a fight. My body thrummed with inappropriate desires to intimidate, to make myself big, to snap jaws I didn't have. Useless, against this kind of threat. Useless anyway, from scrawny little Heather. I couldn't scare anybody, not that way. I think we can talk, I made myself say, forced the words up my reluctant throat. Hold up a SEC, Rain said. You're a lawyer, sure, let's believe that for now. She shrugged, an easy smirk on her lips and turned to Julian, sitting there with his smart suit and his reasonable face and neat hair. But who are you negotiating for? Me? Yeah. You. Come on, fess up, we all heard that earlier apprentice. Apprentice to what? Julian's smile turned ironic again, amused by a private joke. As was stated before, I am Mr. Yulsun's assistant in matters of law. He paused, as if watching to see how well we bought this. He spoke carefully but without any softening of his North London accent, perhaps proud of working-class roots, all broad vowels and glottal stops. And yes, in addition, I am Mr. Lilburn's pupil in matters of magic. Thanks for making it easy. Rain winked and pointed a finger gun at him. Of course they wouldn't come without a mage, Evelyn said. Julian dipped his head. A minor practitioner. I am nothing important, miss. Mr. Lilburn doesn't much like the word cult, Julian said. Silly idea, anyway. We're his associates. There is no bond of duty, no mystical obligations, no mumbo-jumbo. None o' that. Preem, Evelyn said. He does something funny, break his neck. Hey. Nicole sat up. In public? As if I care, Evelyn grunted. Yes, Preem intoned. Julian spread his hands. Mild and reasonable, his mannerisms made my skin crawl, like he was made out of borrowed gestures and hijacked muscle impulses. That won't be necessary. I'm not here to do anything but talk. Then we're all equal, are we not? Christine Hopton asked. Between Evelyn, Amanda, and Julian, each side represented here has brought a magician, of a sort, she added with a glance toward Amanda. This changes nothing. We have Twill, Evelyn has her friend there, she indicated Preem, and you people have well, she tried to smile at Stack, but even the ever-motherly Christine found that hard to maintain when Stack looked back at her. No, Amanda breathed. Her gaze lingered on me. No, we're not equal here. Glances lingered on me. Julian raised his eyebrows in silent question. Rain adjusted her posture, radiated protectiveness. Heather is the most dangerous thing here, by a long shot, yes, Evelyn said. Evie, don't, I hissed. Evelyn glanced at me, appreciative and thankful, for something I couldn't control. I felt my skin crawl. Begin what? Evelyn spat. What is there to talk about? We won, you lost. Why shouldn't I kill you all right now? Evie, please, I forced myself to say, even as my body agreed, yes, kill them all now. Evelyn huffed. What does my client want to discuss? It is simplicity itself, I promise you. Yulsun drew himself up, settling into his element. He clasped his hands together on the table. My client, that is, Mr. Edward Lilburn, wishes to reside in his own home again, rather than relying on the goodwill and charity of his fellows. He would like to walk the streets of Sharrowford once more, the city he was born in which he has lived all but 5 of his 66 years of age. He desires not to worry about being assaulted, or killed, or have his home invaded, magically or otherwise. Put simply, he wishes to make peace, officially and truly and without reservation. As he spoke, Harold Yulson's eyes moved over everyone present, included every single person at both tables, even Preem and the grumpy, sulking Benjamin. Even Amanda's dog. The trick was obvious, but it worked, I felt included, appealed to. He fed us images and possibilities, issues on which our minds were ready to chew. Hammer out here today might also go some way to solving related personal issues, no? Yeah, how about no, said Twill. Ahem, well, my point is this: between us, we represent 3 reasonable, sensible, rational interested parties, all of whom wish for a measure of peace and security. What do I represent then? Nicole asked. The civilian bloody government? Are you not here in an advisory capacity, officer? A sort of chaperone, to make sure nobody pulls a knife on each other, yes? Suppose so. Nicole frowned. Ahem, well. None of us can cover Sharrowford on our own, certainly not if we're at each other's throats. But, with an agreement to stop attempting to turn each other into frogs or blow each other up or set zombies on each other, we can make sure that Sharrowford stays quiet. Quieter than lately, at least. He tittered again, a chattering rodent laugh. Man's got a point, Nicole said. You're not rival drug gangs trying to muscle in on turf. But think about what he's selling you here, and why. Why? You'll pull the hurt and offended face. Why, officer, I am not selling anything. I am attempting to the best of meager abilities to bring this conflict to an end. What's your retainer? She asked. Don't be silly, you know I'm not at liberty to discuss financial matters. Forgive me, Evelyn drawled, dripping with sarcasm. A little hard to believe any of this, from the people who planned to murder me in my sleep. I hated that he made sense. He was right if he spoke truth, a loading bearing if. I did need Sharrowford to be quieter. I did need to live my life because my life right now consisted of the desire to rescue my sister. I needed space and time, and no more interruptions. Tongue-tied and intellectually constipated, I'd come here with a head full of ideas and a nervous system full of tension and the expectation of violence, ready for a confrontation with a monster, accusations to throw in his face, promises to extract. All my resolve meant nothing now. I felt browbeaten and wrong-footed. Abyssal bodily dysmorphia told me I was supposed to be fast, nimble, to slip and slide through the waves, untouched and untouchable. The way this man talked made me feel pinned, cornered. I needed to retreat, gather myself before I agreed to anything. I don't like this, I almost hissed. I'm not comfortable with this. We're being led up the garden path, Rain said. Please, Yulsun said. Take time to think through the basic proposal, talk it over with each other. We can absent ourselves from the table, give you some space if you like. This is only the preliminary stage, we have specifics to propose, issues to address and dash. You don't think I can look after Sharrowford by myself? Evelyn asked, darkly unimpressed. She indicated Preem with the head of her walking stick. What do you think she is? Do you think I can't summon another dozen of her? You know who my mother was, don't you? She addressed the last question to Julian, but Yulsun answered. Oh, I'm certain you can, he said. But the real question is, do you want to? The, young lady you refer to, I'm certain she is a handful all by herself, no? Do you really wish to dedicate your life to raising and shepherding a dozen, 2 dozen more? If your resolve is really that strong, Miss Say, I'm afraid we would have to give Sharrowford over to you, yes, wouldn't we, Julian? Certainly, said Julian, though he bobbed his head from one side to the other in a curious gesture of denial. Evelyn's bluff did not convince, not even me. I knew she'd been reluctant to split Preem back into 2 bodies like before, I only hadn't asked why. How about I just kill you all now? Evelyn spat, and my heart sang yes. The trigger word was on my lips. Get it over with dash. But are you willing to do that over and over? Yulsun put in quickly. Are you willing to take such risks, without end? To live that way? You have something in the bag, don't you? Julian asked. Small enough to carry, yet dangerous enough to highlight. Yet I feel no threat from you. Interesting. From the way we know you operate, I would bet some kind of possessed animal. Evelyn visibly puffed herself up, chin high, eyes blazing. You want this thing to crawl through your bedroom window at 3 o'clock in the morning? Keep pushing. The answer, sir, Julian turned to his boss, is no. She can't take that risk over and over. That, he nodded at the bag, likely could kill us all, yeah, but they'll have to put it down afterward. Quite a task. And it wouldn't be able to find Mr. Lilburn, as he is not present. Smart, no. Evelyn ground her teeth together and opened her mouth. In him dash. Evie, I snapped, a half hiss, my throat constricting. Let it go. She glared at me sidelong. Heather dash. Edward will still be out there. We missed our chance, I forced myself to say. Every cell screamed the opposite, end this now, back away, hide. Kill and flee. Denied the shot, Rain sighed, then shrugged and grinned. Oh well. Salways next time. I think we should keep talking, at least, I lied. I thought no, I felt no. Maybe we can, I don't know. Yulsun smiled a creased, oily, ingratiating smile at me. His eyes said it all, said he'd won. My hackles rose, my limbs vibrated with the need to leap up and snap in his face. Limbs I did not really possess ached to strike at him, force him to retreat. I clamped down on all of it, held myself as still as I could, shivering inside my coat, small and scrawny and weak and human. Talk was sensible, I reminded myself, made it into a silent mantra in my head. Talk, negotiate, look for an advantage. I knew you were the brains out of the outfit, Miss Morel, from the moment I saw you, Yulsun said, then paused as if unsure. Stack stared at me, curious and intense. She hates you, Stack informed him. Well, more's the pity, but we can't win them all, he said. Hate does not come into it. I'm sure you understand, yes, Miss Morel. You're an intelligent woman, we can come to some kind of compromise. Always beware the quiet ones, that's what I say. He made a gesture toward Stack and let out another tittering laugh. The sound set my teeth on edge. I would like to explore this deal of yours as well, Christine Hopton said. She looked pointedly at Evelyn, who could barely conceal her glare of displeasure. It's just talk, Nicole said softly. You don't have to agree to anything. Yeah, no, Rain said. I don't trust this as far as I can throw it, which, hey, maybe not the best analogy, because I could punt this guy halfway across the garden. She nodded at Yulsun. If we're voting, I vote let's rumble. Rain, I said. We can't just, I can't give in to Dash. Rain's eyebrows climbed in surprise as I cut myself off. I'd let it slip, out in the open. Everyone heard. Can't give in to the cold survivalist logic of the abyss, can't act like that here. I felt so trapped. A hiss rose in my throat again, and this time I knew I couldn't stop it, a defensive noise of frustration and threat warning. Get away, shut up, stop, stop. Stack looked up. Past me and Rain and Evelyn. Past Preem. An instant snap to of attention. Huh, she grunted. Wired on abyssal echo and phantom aggression, I couldn't turn to look. My body tensed, two conflicted sets of muscles, screamed trap. I stared at Stack, one false move away from lunging at her. Suicidal in hindsight, an urge that would terrify me in lonely, quiet moments for weeks after. Small little Heather, tackling a professional killer, because why? Because I got spooked by my own brain ghosts. Thankfully, nobody else was experiencing a terminal identity crisis. I can't see from here, Amanda said, and her dog sat up too, suddenly alert and on guard. But that isn't a person. Bernard, down, sit. It's okay, down. Oh great, Twill sighed. It's her. Nothing is great about that, Evelyn said, her voice tight. Heather. I couldn't look away from Stack. In the corner of my eye, I noticed the Hopton's bubble servitor angel thing adjusting itself, reorienting toward whatever Stack had noticed. Nicole was laughing. You weren't kidding when you said she's too conspicuous. She stands out like a scarecrow, they'll see her from the pub, easily. Heather, it's okay, Rain murmured. Deep down, far deeper than the impression left by the abyss, my body knew that if Rain said I was safe, I was safe. Phantom muscles unclenched, I drew in a shuddering breath, and looked over my shoulder. At the far end of the weed-choked campsite field, maybe 200 meters distant, just inside the fence which held back a thick copse of trees, a figure stood, facing us. I couldn't see her face. I didn't need to. Hooded and cloaked in a long coat, clothes baggy and dark, framed between the shadows of the wood behind and the scudding clouds above. She'd emerged from nowhere, a fairy creature formed by the landscape itself. Zheng. Oh. Oh dear, said Yulsun. I was out of my seat and on my feet before I knew what I was doing, 3 paces toward the field before Rain caught my arm. Whoa, Heather, slow down. I have to, I whirled on Rain. Behind her, Stack leaned over to whisper in Yulsun's ear. Now? He asked her. We're just getting started. She's become especially protective, I said to Stack, loud and clear, felt myself puffing up with bizarre pride. Of me and mine. You better run. Run away, Preem intoned, but she was looking at me. Oh fiddlesticks, this is nonsense, Yulsun huffed. Miss Morel, I am certain we will all be fine. Is this person really so dangerous? For goodness sake, we're in a pub garden. Stack ignored him. She stood up slowly, hands carefully visible, and watched Zheng. I lowered my voice for Rain. I need to talk to her. You know I need to talk to her. Cool, I'll come with Dash. No. I shook my head, and a strange seed of guilt sprouted in my belly. I spoke fast, flustering, blushing in confusion and panic. You need to stay with Evie, don't you? It's dangerous with these people, you can't leave her alone. I'm going in the opposite direction, I'll be fine. Evie's got Twill and Preem, she's safe, Rain said softly, for my ears only. She read me like an open book. Heather, what's wrong? Please, I want to talk to her, by myself. I squeezed the words out in a half-whisper, but I couldn't admit to myself why I said them. I wanted to get away from this entrapment here, this feeling that all my responses were wrong. Jing called to me. The romance of her figure beneath the roiling gray sky, her solid silence, the way she stood out on the empty plain of the field, on the edge of the woods. It called to my soul, and I couldn't voice why. It was not a human thing. She's perfectly safe, I babbled on, covering for myself. She saved my life, twice. She's Dash. What if it's not really her? Rain raised her eyes, studied Zheng as best she could at a distance. It is her. I can tell. I can. Rain, I can tell. What if this is a trap? She shook her head. This stinks to high heaven. Come on, she'll be glad to see us both, we'll dash. Rain, I almost hissed at her, an animal need bubbling in my throat. I pulled on my arm, tried to yank free from her grip, and for a terrible moment I thought she was going to hold fast, tighten her hand, that she wouldn't get it. I was mad, almost frantic, a hiss rising between my teeth. And Rain let go. Whoa, Heather, cool, we're cool, she said, low and hushed. I stumbled away a couple of paces, shocked at myself. What is she doing? Evelyn snapped. Heather, what on earth are you doing? Hey, Rain said, grinning for me. You gotta do what you gotta do. I'll watch. Anything happens you don't like, you turn and run, I'll be there before you can blink. I nodded, shaking a little as turned away from Rain, and stepped out onto the field. Crossing the off-season campground was not easy on my muscles or knees, not easy for awkward and elegant Heather, in my comfortable trainers and jeans, across slippery, uneven, rutted earth, around clutches of thistle and patches of ragwort. Twice I nearly fell over, stumbled and tripped on rabbit holes. Should have worn Wellington boots. Didn't care. Moving felt wonderful, working my lungs felt right. Muscles and puffing breath, no matter how weak, brought me out of the hole of entrapment I'd felt back there. I passed the spirit out in the campground, a mass of tentacles 20 feet high, pulsing and throbbing to itself. It bent away from me, a plant avoiding fire. Couldn't tear my eyes away from Zheng. My stomach was full of butterflies. When I drew close enough to pick out her face beneath the hood of her huge and probably stolen coat, she grinned. Her face split across the middle into that unmistakable shark-toothed grin. Deep inside I flushed with warmth. ZH, Zheng. I called out. I'd expected to bristle. After all, Zheng was big and scary, a predator, a threat. The memory of my abyssal form should have arched its back and hissed at her. Instead, I felt a tentative openness, a wary friendship, excited. I all but ran the last few paces, stumbling, and stopped before her, panting for breath. The trees loomed above us, cast darker shade on this already grim day. Shaman, she purred. A voice like granite. Zheng. Where have you been? Why didn't you come back? I panted. I tried to find you, but I shrugged, exasperated. You're so difficult to track. I frowned at her, swallowed, struggled with the desire to what? I couldn't place it. Standing close to her felt good, made me feel small but in a pleasurable way, made me feel understood. Goodness, she was tall. Easy to forget, with 2 weeks apart, how big Zheng was. I had to look upward. Fathom? Fathom what? You look good. She did. I doubt the concept of human health applied to a demon-ridden 1,000-year-old corpse, but she looked somehow healthier, her red-brown skin full of life, her eyes brimming with slow, tiger-like attention beneath the hood. The clothes she'd stolen or otherwise acquired were shapeless and ugly, an old waxed coat and a huge baggy fisherman's jumper to replace her lost t-shirt, but even they couldn't conceal the curves and power beneath, the way her every movement hummed with energy. She had been eating plenty, I suppose. Zheng grinned wider. At the compliment, or at what she saw reflected in my eyes. And then she darted forward, a giant in sudden quicksilver motion. I yelped and flinched hard. Doesn't matter how much I thought of her as safe, there is only one response to being rushed by a wall of muscle. I almost fell over onto the mud in surprise, but Jing caught me. She scooped me up and set me back on my feet. The sheer heat of her hands leaked through my clothes, left warm patches behind. Jing ran hot. Okay, I blinked, stammering, trying to steady my knees. Jing raised her chin, amused at my clumsy ape reactions. You should have seen that one coming. A test. Too slow, little monkey, too slow. Jing laughed. I gave her a capital G glare. What's the matter, shaman? You know what the matter is. Don't surprise me like that. I don't know what your dash, I halted. I did know. I felt it right now. It had drawn me across the field to her, and now it left me flushed and excited in her presence. The memory of the abyss responded to her. Something in me wanted to be around her, and it was not entirely sexual. Not entirely human. Standing out here on the edge of the woods with Jing felt real. Sitting back there in a pub garden, talking, negotiating, hadn't felt right. None of it. Back there my intellect was at odds with my instinct. The old, cliched mind-body duality had, for me, become stark reality. Sitting quietly, huddled up in my coat, pretending I would negotiate politely for the safety of my friends. My body hated every moment, made demands I could not match. Out here under the darkening sky, dwarfed by a giant of feminine muscle, on the edge of the woods and freedom and running, my responses made sense. My feelings made sense. Shouldn't have left Rain behind. I don't feel right, I admitted. I'm supposed to be sitting in a library, reading a book, not, I gestured helplessly at the mess behind me. Not this. Jing made a sound like a sleepy tiger. Look, Jing, why are you here now? How did you find us? Do you want to come back to the house? I want you to, I dash. Jing shrugged, a rolling mountain. Guarding you. Guarding me? You're easy to find now, shaman. Can smell you 100 miles away. Doubt I'm the only one. Oh, geez, thanks. I tried to laugh, to make a joke of this, but the sound came out hollow. Shaman, she breathed. You did it. The way she said that word sent a shiver up my spine. Reverence, fascination, nostalgia. She watched me with a burning intensity. Did what? You're even more like her now. She grinned, chuckled softly. You left your body. You're fumbling, with what you found on your Erasure and Iolo. Stole fire from the gods, but now you don't know what to do with it. That's just like her too. Spent a month curled up by the fire, couldn't wipe her own arse, feed herself, talk. Maybe you're stronger. Who are you talking about? Jing. You have to let yourself feel it, shaman. Embrace it, flesh and spirit both. Use it. She nodded back toward the pub. Use it on them. Wield it on your enemies, and never doubt it is right. The other way lies madness, you monkeys are so fragile. Like, I'm sorry, Jing, I'm like who? Her grin died slowly. The fire went out of her eyes, replaced with a fleeting melancholy. Maybe you are her, Jing rumbled. Maybe you humans get reborn. Maybe the joke is on me. I'm not. I'm me. Jing, I'm Heather. I'm not anybody else. Are you talking about somebody you used to know? The giant zombie let out a huge sigh. I know, shaman. I had the terrible sense the moment was slipping through my fingers, that Jing was withdrawing again. She'd slip back into the wood and I'd never find her a second time if she didn't want to be found. I couldn't bear to lose this clarity of mind and body. Standing with Jing on the edge of the wild felt right, in the same way that moving my body felt right, in the same way that skinship with Rain felt right. Jing broke back into a grin, her melancholy washed away. She glanced past my shoulder. You monkeys are all too alike. Can't tell the difference half the time. Jing, don't go. What if I dash? I glanced at the woods behind her, felt a burning gut-sick need, half human and half abyssal. I wanted her to pick me up and carry me off. It was mad. I swallowed, mouth dry, hands shaking. If I dash. If you leave these monkeys behind, run off with me to have sex in the woods, she purred. I blushed like a tomato. With frozen muscles, my heart pounding, I managed to squeak, not necessarily what I meant, but... You're committed, shaman, Jing rumbled. She raised a hand and pointed past me with one finger. I followed it, and saw Rain was halfway across the field, walking toward us. I turned back to Jing, paralyzed now. Nothing could make me leave Rain, that seemed absurd, but at the same time I needed something I couldn't put into words, something the ghost of my abyssal self felt in Jing's presence, a safety, a comfort, a rightness. Jing stared back at me, not grinning at all anymore. Be what you are now, shaman, or they'll eat you alive. You have to eat them first. Eat them first. Jing rumbled. The sound reverberated, a tiger's purr in her chest. She was indescribably beautiful. Even wrapped in shapeless, ratty old clothes, soaked in days of sweat and dirt, her hair greasy and stuck to her scalp, a wild woman eating sheep and ghosting across the moors, she was beautiful. Even with her sharp-edged face darkened in melancholy, rejecting me in a way I didn't fully understand, she was beautiful. 7 feet of iron muscle and honeyed skin like cinnamon chocolate. A scent on the wind like hot spice and healthy sweat. The razor eyes of a true predator, teeth like knives, a taste for human flesh. Jing was so beautiful it hurt. She was a walking wet dream from a fantasy I'd never known I wanted, but what I felt in that moment was more than physical desire. Dwarfed by her, beneath the gray clouds and the tree trunks on the edge of the wild, the memory of my abyssal form stirred with need and nostalgia, kinship and recognition. Jing was a thing from the abyss, too. Embodied in stolen human flesh, greater than the sum of her parts. Like me. That didn't excuse my lust. Oh, damn it all, I huffed. This is absurd. Love triangles are a stupid cliché, I sighed. I can't believe we're doing this, now, here, with all that going on. I gestured vaguely behind me, back toward the pub garden. The sensation of phantom limbs plagued the periphery of my awareness, as tentacles and feelers ached to reach out and touch Jing. You are a problem, do you know that? Jing grinned in full once more. Am I? Why won't you come back to the house? We need to sort this out, you and I think, but not right now, not here. Sort what out, shaman? I frowned up a storm at her. You know what I'm feeling, you recognized it already. Don't make me say it. You're in heat. If you must put it like that. I felt myself blush, cheeks beet red. We can't just leave this unsaid and unfinished. Don't run off, please. Rain's already on her way, we can resolve this, it doesn't need to be complicated. Jing chuckled. You monkeys think nothing is complicated. Jing, please, stay. Her eyes flicked past me, over my shoulder. I would win, she murmured, a noise like the whisper of a distant storm. Winning and losing have nothing to do with it, I snapped, at the end of my patience, for both myself and this situation. I don't necessarily want to run off into the woods and do things with you, but I do want you to stay with me, please. Jing. Please. I swallowed, blushed harder, and forced the question out before Rain reached us. Do you even have a human sexuality? You are the last person I should be taking dietary advice from. Can't you help me with them? Don't tempt me. Why not? Aren't you with me, Jing? You said that before, you dash. I am, shaman, she growled. A tremor of fear and excitement passed through my chest and belly and down into my groin. If I get too close, there will be a fight. I will win, and you will hate me. Footsteps slapped against the muddy ground behind me. Rain jogged up the last few paces. She touched my back with one hand, and nodded to Zheng. Hey there, big girl. What's up? Eat them first, shaman, Zheng repeated. Embrace what you are. Use what you brought back. Don't lose your mind. And then she left. Zheng jerked like a lightning bolt, from a standing start to a flowing sprint in the blink of an eye. She whirled on one heel, her back foot throwing up a clod of mud with the sheer power of her pivot. She raced for the woods, coat flapping out behind her like a fleeing suspect in some film noir sequence. Spirit life deeper in the woods scattered before her. She vaulted the fence, landed with the grace of a panther, and vanished between the trees. After 3 seconds, the woods swallowed even the sound of her footsteps. Damn her. She can't just run off like that. Oh, I huffed, exasperated. Rain linked our arms together and slipped her hand into mine. Looks like she can, and she did. Real flying visit. Sorry, Heather. Rain had the good grace to wince in apology. I know I said I'd let you talk to her alone, but the way she lunged at you, I didn't like that at all. It's not your fault. She was leaving anyway, I snapped, half hiding my face to conceal my blush. We need to get back to the others. Heather? You all right? I know, no, not really. No. Embrace what I am. What had Jing meant? I felt as if had 2 bodies, my physical form and a yearning abyssal memory of oceanic grace. Both were true, both were real. How could I embrace a mutually exclusive paradox? I was not a thing of the abyss, I did not have tentacles and spines and barbed hooks. I could barely swim. I was in the wrong body, whichever principle I stuck to. She say something to upset you? Rain asked. Or just, you sad she's gone again. I opened my mouth to lie, but instinct betrayed me. I glanced at Rain's eyes, and couldn't look away again. Wind teased the ends of her chestnut hair, brushed it across her forehead. Guilt and fear fought in my chest, scared little Heather dragged me down an abyssal memory didn't understand. Rain waited, perfectly open and understanding. She always was. I took the shot. I can't tell, oh, damn it, there's no good way to say this. I blushed scarlet, breath trapped in my throat. I'm desperately attracted to Zheng, and I'm going to need your help with that feeling. Yeah, course you are. Rain laughed. Course I am. I echoed, stunned. Rain shrugged. Sure. She saves you a couple of times, she's impressive, bold. Those tits. Hell, I would be. Nothing to be ashamed of, nothing odd about that. Best not bottle it up, Okay, then. Rain's acceptance didn't make me feel any better. Where was the blazing jealousy, where was the wounded suggestion to follow Zheng if I wanted her so badly? Part of me craved punishment, wanted to be told off, told I was wrong. But Rain didn't think like that. Instead, the strange abyssal yearning for Zheng grew stronger, as if given permission. Part of me almost wanted to break for the woods now, try to find her. Instead, I made myself look back down the length of the campsite field, past thistle and mud, to the back garden of the Bricklayer's Arms. The others, friend and foe alike, still watched us. Yeah, Rain sighed. Gotta go wrap that up, I guess. Let's run them off and head home, yeah. Zheng had advice about that too, I murmured. Yeah, culinary, by the sounds of it. When all you've got's a massive set of chompers, I guess all the world looks like meat. I feel like we're being trapped. We need a way out. I can't figure out what to do. A light went on inside me, a dim potential, the faintest shadow of what Zheng might have meant. When all you've got's a massive set of chompers, I echoed. Clarity, of a kind, came over me. This would be a gamble. Evelyn would approve. Rain lit up with a grin. Is that a cunning plan I see in your eyes? I love it when you get plans, Heather, it's hot as hell. Rain, you're a genius and I love you, I said, as I stared back at the pub garden. I clung to her arm for support. True, and true. I am just that awesome. What's the plan, boss? Eat them first. Help me walk back, please. Our return was met by a chorus of curious stares, confused frowns, and inane questions which I did my best to ignore. What the bloody hell was that all about? Michael Hopton asked, his arms crossed over his chest. Who was that? Dad, I told you already, Twill tooted, then turned to me. Why'd she scarper again? What happened? Yulsun preened and smiled at me, his hands clutching each other like hairless moles. Is our digression quite concluded now, Miss Morel? If you are ready, may we resume where we left off? No luck, EY. Nicole asked quietly. I shook my head at that one. Who was that, Heather, dear? Christine Hopton asked. Nobody, Preem intoned. Yeah, a big scary nobody who'll rip your face off if you double-cross us, Rain said. She moved to help me sit down, but I stayed standing, arm in arm with her for support. Heather? Evelyn said. She managed to cram an entire question into my name, Heather, why did you let the giant rogue zombie run off again? I tried to ignore her too. For now. I ignored Yulsun's bleeding and Stack's stare, hired muscle and hired mind, they didn't matter. I tuned out Twill and the rest of her family, they weren't my enemy. I attempted to ignore Evelyn turning to once again whack the rustling sports bag with the head of her walking stick. I made myself stand straight, raised my chin, disentangled myself from Rain and took a half step away from her. She understood, and let me go. Easier than before, if only by a fraction. Scrawny little Heather, trying to radiate threat, holding back a hiccup as I stood tall. Well, as tall as I could get. I locked eyes with the only foe here who really mattered, past all the obfuscation and misdirection, past Yulsun's slimy words and the extra baggage of inviting a third party, past the element of surprise and anticlimax they'd sprung on us. Julian met my gaze. Polite and reasonable, smartly dressed, with a question in the quirk of his eyebrows. Edward's apprentice. What would Jing do? Well, she certainly wouldn't hiccup, which is what I did first. Once, then twice, as I swallowed my fear. Zheng would probably pull out somebody's tongue or bite off their fingers. She wouldn't bluff. She'd apply an object lesson. I offered Julian my hand. Miss Morel. What's this? Shake, I said. The others fell silent. Perhaps they sensed my intent, even those unaware of what I could do. Julian regarded my hand with an ironic twitch at the corners of his mouth. Stax told us all about how you do what you do, he said. What are you trying to prove? You can shake my hand, I hiccuped again, clenched. Down hard on the shaking inside, on the fear. Or I can have Rain hold you down first. Julian raised his eyebrows. Stack went very still, though she'd been barely moving before, perhaps it was a shift in her breathing, a minute change in muscle tension. Abyssal instinct screamed to hiss at her, make her back away, but I held off with sheer force of will. I am hissing at these people, I told myself. Patience. Are you making a threat? Julian asked. Yes. Yes, I do believe I am. Julian's smile worsened, a full-on sighing smirk. Go on then, give it a whirl. See how far you get. You've misjudged your position, Julian, I said, and almost kept the shake out of my voice. If that is even your real name. Your master has misjudged what he's dealing with. We laid a trap, you're correct about that, but the trap is not what Evelyn has summoned. In the corner of my eye, I saw an evil little smile on Evelyn's face. She enjoyed this, in a manner I was incapable of. "I'm the trap," I said. "Oh, come now," Yulsun huffed. "Don't be so dash. You're all within my range, sitting here. Technically I don't even have to touch you. I can define you, cut you out from reality, send you outside. Yes, it will hurt, rather a lot. I'll be reduced to vomiting and bleeding and I might even pass out, that's always fun, yes. But I will do it. I will absolutely do it. I have dash," my throat threatened to close up around the words. A sense of self-violation slid into my chest, but I slammed myself onto that spear as hard as I could, turned my secrets into a weapon. I've been beyond reality, to the intercellular space between dimensions. I'm the adopted child of an alien god. And I will flay you, your master, and everything of his, down to atoms, to avert even a single bruise on any of my friends. Silence. To one side, I felt Twill wary and on edge, not sure which way to leap. Stack watched me, face a cold neutral. Over on the other table, the Hopton seemed quite shocked. Evelyn smirked with dark satisfaction. Blushing, quivering, and painfully alone despite Rain at my side, I held myself as rigid as I could. "We know you're blocked," Stack said, slow and calm. No, I'm not bluffing," I said, pushed past the sudden drop of fear in my belly. How did she know that? "I'm blocked from going outside myself, but I can still send other things there. Also, thank you, for revealing you know that." "You're welcome," Stack replied. "Yeah," Rain said. "Which means if you don't want to play a game of death tag, you need to listen to my girl here." She pointed at me with both fingers and cracked a grin. "You're not here to negotiate a necessary peace deal." I hiccuped loudly, swallowed. "You're here to beg for your lives." Now that was a bluff. Abyssal aggression and natural fear finally slid together as I spoke those words. Two ecosystems of thought, alien to each other, merged inside my psyche. Fundamental truth shuddered through me, akin to the moment a magic eye picture resolves into clarity, and one feels so very silly that one did not see it before. The shaking, scared Heather, who felt small and vulnerable, who still relied on the desperate logic of a terrified little girl separated from her sister. She clung hard to the abyssal animal I'd been, and the memory wrapped her in armor, hid her inside a forest of spines, flooded her blood with oxygen and her brain with oxytocin. Zheng's advice finally made sense. I embraced me. The phantom limbs and awful bodily dysmorphia did not go away. Nothing was ever so easy. But the aggression subsided, wrapped back into my sense of self, ready to be used. For the first time since I'd returned from the abyss, I felt almost whole. Apparently, according to what Rain told me much later, the way I smiled was most off-putting for our enemies. Looking a bit crazy is most effective after delivering a threat. Hell yeah, Rain murmured. Yulsun stood up, flapping his hands. Miss Morel, I understand you are frustrated, we all are, but these threats aren't going to achieve dash. You know, Rain said, easy and conversational. I think you should shut up. Check yourself before you wreck yourself. My girl here ain't playing around. Evie was right, I tooted at him. You don't even matter. You're tits on a fish. You stay quiet and sit down, and if you don't, I shall slap you. What? Evelyn spluttered. Nicole burst out laughing. Oh shit, yeah, she's good at that, Twill said. She'll slap your shit right up. Don't be so ridiculous, Yulsun huffed. We're in public, that is the point of this meeting, no. No violence is going to happen here, not with a police officer present and a pub full of ordinary people behind us. Miss Morel, surely you can't see any sense in pursuing this strategy of bluff and dash. TCH. Time for the object lesson. I hadn't used brain math since my return from the abyss. The eyes lessons lay at the base of my consciousness, the empty socket of a shattered tooth, full of pulped, tender flesh, bruised and strained by the journey beyond my body, but this was a simple equation, the familiar old equation to shunt matter outside. I began, summoned up the first few figures of the necessary hyperdimensional mathematics. Pain. Like peeling a blood clot out of a wound. Exposed bone. Raw nerves. Pain. Pain, different to the usual, sharp, deep, panic pain. I recoiled in shock, a split-second wince, and knew in an instant that this would not merely make me vomit or pass out. This species of pain would break me before I could complete even half the equation. My object lesson was all for naught. All my threats, undermined. Not strong enough to carry out Zheng's advice, not savage enough to eat them first, held back by my weak human body and this prison of vulnerable flesh. Stack thought my brain math was blocked, interdicted, that I was made safe by some unseen machination, but the truth was far worse, I was still healing. I couldn't do it. They'd called my bluff. In a fit of helpless pique, I reached out with my phantom limbs. Bodily illusions that existed only in my mind. If only I was strong, if only I could strangle these three, unleash on them the creature which memory told me I was meant to be. And in that split second, I saw what Zheng had really meant. The tiniest piece of hyperdimensional mathematics would suffice, a single variable in the infinite weave of reality. From a 0 to a 1, from non-existence to being. I could take that much pain. At the speed of thought, it was done. Mathematics tasted different. Taste is the only human concept able to capture even a shade of the sensation. Bitter, gritty with bone fragments and impacted gravel in bruised tissue, the flexing of a muscle pitted with infected wounds. You shook it out, made it bleed fresh, pumped white blood cells to flush out the open sores. Clean and strong and clear, a spike of pain passed in a wave, there and gone again. 3 tentacles of Pneuma-Somatic flesh sprouted from my flanks. Visible only to myself and to Preem, most likely the ropes of spirit muscle passed straight through my clothes as if the fabric wasn't there, 2 on my left and 1 on my right. Pale, smooth, sleek, sunless deep-sea flesh, they strobed with rainbow bioluminescence. As wide as my wrist, each tapered to a delicate point, yet all were infinitely tough and infinitely dexterous. As they arced along the very lines I'd imagined for them, I felt their roots anchored deep inside my torso, melded to my flesh with Pneuma-Somatic tendon and cartilage. Such a rush of power and speed and grace. For a split second, I was once again what I was meant to be. An abyssal thing of infinite and glorious possibility. And bluster, Yulsun blinked. Miss Morel? I'm not certain, but I think I hissed at him. With one tentacle, I flipped Yulsun's briefcase into his face. It burst open in a cloud of papers, sent him yelping and fumbling. With the second I delivered a hard shove to the center of Stack's chest, tumbling her off the bench to sprawl on her backside. With the third I tried to slap Julian across the cheek hard enough to leave a welt, but in my inexperience I landed only a glancing blow. Still enough to leave him clutching his face and blinking at the unseen attack. So flushed with joy, I missed the way the tentacle seemed to slide off him. Yulsun's papers fluttered down through the air as he tried to catch them. Stack jackknifed herself to her feet, one hand inside her coat as rain ready to draw as well, to protect me. The math students at the far end of Pub Garden were in the process of standing up, frowning at our commotion. One of them started to say something, hands cupped to his mouth. Nicole was laughing, saying something about how we're doing poltergeists now, are we? Benjamin and Michael Hopton were both on their feet, staring, lost, couldn't see what to react to. Amanda's dog, poor sweet Bernard the golden retriever, growled at me. Without thinking I whipped a tentacle around, ready to knock his brains out. Amanda Hopton stared, wide-eyed in a silent scream, but the Hopton's bubble servitor did not share its handler's paralysis. It started for me, a bulbous glugging mass writhing through the air. I raised a second tentacle to swat it to the ground. The third of my tentacles reared back, as I entertained the notion of strangling Stack to death. And then I crashed. down and out. Sudden exhaustion drowned me, as if I'd walked for days. Couldn't get any strength into my knees. My vision swam, the world span, and I reeled back. With my tentacles I made a grab for the edge of the table, but they were withering, graying, shrinking. They turned to ash and fell away to nothing. An awful nerve-deep pain lanced into my sides where they'd been rooted. A gasp ripped up through my throat. I cried out. I flailed, tried to catch myself. With claws and spines and barbed flesh hooks I did not possess. Rain caught me instead. Whoa, whoa, Heather, hey, hey, I got you, I got you. I gasped again, doubled over, another stab of pain in my sides, cold fire under my ribcage. Cold sweat, panic, pain of bodily error, a fatal chemical factory malfunction. My body screamed that something soft and fleshy and vulnerable was broken. I made sharp little noises, trying to hold the sensation back. It receded, barely, replaced by a dull throbbing ache like I'd been knifed in the sides. That's it, just breathe, Heather. It's okay, be sick if you need to. Far worse than the pain, the feeling of bodily wholeness and rightness ebbed away, left me shivering and small and flawed, rotting and aging. I choked on a sob. Such lost glory. Turns out the creation and maintenance of Pneuma-Somatic flesh is a great strain upon a physical being. Who would have guessed? Whatever I'd done it for the first time, and strained every muscle and sense involved. I could barely keep my eyes open. My briefcase. Yule's son was flapping about. These are important papers, they're everywhere. Oh, my Kindle's fallen in the mud. Oh no, oh dear, oh dear. Could burst dash, I croaked, then forced myself upright, leaning into Rain for support. She steadied me, murmured soft encouragement, took the lion's share of my weight. Could burst you the same way. Yule's son boggled at me for a second. Finally, he shut his mouth. Everyone was staring at me. Christine Hopton's brow was furrowed with motherly concern, while her husband had no idea what to make of what I'd just done. Bernard, Amanda's dog, growled softly in the back of his throat at me. She soothed him, held him back. Benjamin stared in silence, no longer sullen. At least it was only a briefcase this time, Nicole said. Yes, Stack agreed. Nicole raised her empty pint glass in an ironic mock toast. No, Preem intoned. How'd you do that? Julian asked slowly. He rubbed at his jaw where I'd hit him, though his dark skin showed no bruise. Yeah, Michael Hopton added. What the hell just happened, what was that? Yeah, Twill said. Was that us? Stack asked the question too, though without words. She dialed back a notch from drawing whatever concealed weapon she carried. It was her, Rain said with a laugh. See? Told you, Heather'll kick all your arses. Christine Hopton raised her hand and waved to the three concerned-looking students at the far end of the garden, still watching us with interest. We're fine, nothing to worry about, she called. Just a little sensitive stomach. That was some kind of trick, something you set up in advance, right? Julian continued softly. No, Amanda Hopton answered for me as I started at Julian. It was her. She grew shining limbs, beautiful and I'm sorry, excuse me. She put a hand to her chest, as if in pain. In the corner of my eye I noticed the bubble servitor retreating again, back to its holding pattern. Preem watched it go. If frowns could kill, Evelyn would have struck me dead at that moment. She watched me with half outrage, half worry. I nodded back at her and mouthed some nonsense platitude I don't recall. Fascinating, Julian said, chin in his hand. Fascinating. His expression reminded me all too much of Evelyn, naked hunger. Yeah, you keep being fascinated at a nice safe distance there, mate, Rain said. Julian raised both hands in a gesture of quick surrender. Hurts, I croaked. But I can do it again. A lie, but a good one. Next time I'll pull your heads off. Schlor pop. Rain made an illustrative sound. I had to resist the urge to roll my eyes. We didn't need that, however gruesome. Which means you're going to answer, do dash, I struggled, woozy, exhaustion dragging at my limbs. I strangled a gasp as another wave of jagged pain lanced into my sides where my tentacles had been so briefly rooted. Is she all right? Heather dear? Christine Hopton asked. Evelyn clutched her walking stick and lurched out of her seat. With a glance thrown toward our enemies, she turned her back on them, and leaned in close to Rain and I. Rain, we need to get Heather to a hospital. What? Rain hissed back. Explain, quick. No. I blurted out. This is our chance, we can make demands dash. Evelyn's eyes blazed at me, though she kept her voice low. You think I don't know what you just did to yourself? Me, of all people. That little stunt may have torn up your insides like a threshing machine. She snapped back to Rain. She might have internal bleeding, I don't know. Hospital. Now. Shit, Twill hissed. She'd leaned in too, frowning at me in horror. I'm fine. I croaked. Suddenly only pain. Not bleeding. Rain glanced quickly between Evelyn and I. Heather, I won't let you hurt yourself. I didn't realize dash. Please. Suddenly chance. I struggled to keep my eyes open, to put on a brave face. The pain lingered, sharp and bone deep. I had to end this here, make these people admit defeat, back off from me and my friends and Lazi, and there was only one path to that now. 5 minutes. I will. Rain nodded. She held me close, held me up. 5 minutes. Evelyn turned back to our mystified audience. The terms of this meeting have changed, Evelyn announced. You answer our questions, quickly, and you do what we tell you to. Julian bowed his head and spread his hands in assent, but not once did his ironic smile slip. Yulsun huffed and sat back down clutching his briefcase, his hair in even greater tufty disarray than before. Unless you're threatening violence, Miss Say, I shall have to discuss any agreed-upon action with my client, you dash. Yes, I croaked. Yes, do that, Evelyn snapped. Toddle off back to Eddie Boy and let him know our demands, Rain said. Gently, she tried to help me sit, but I shook my head and clung to her, knew that I'd struggle to stay conscious the moment I allowed myself to rest. You do know this merely delays an inevitable peace, yes? Yulsun said. This is why I never, ever like to work with teenagers, so bloody unreasonable. We can work with this, Julian said softly. No worries, Harry. This is a mage's matter now, I'll take over. Harold Yulsun huffed a little sigh and wiggled his eyebrows to himself, looking off to the side. Hurry this up, Evelyn snapped. 5 minutes and counting. If we don't have what we want by then, I'll open the trap. Julian ignored both Yulsun's wounded theatrics and Evelyn's threat, and instead glanced at Stack. Amy, you're not thinking of bugging out, are you? Stack had not sat back down. Tension was locked around her flint-hard eyes and across her wiry shoulders. She watched me for a silent moment, trying to read or understand or judge. I stared back, too exhausted to care. Amy? Julian repeated. The only reason she hasn't killed us is because she can't right now, Stack replied. I grunted at her. Miss Amanda Hopton, she said. How long were those tentacles? Amanda cleared her throat, had trouble meeting Stack's cold gaze. I'm not, maybe 6 or 7 feet, maybe more. Longer, I croaked, trying to give Stack a nasty smile to remember. How did it feel? Real. Oh, do sit down, Yulsun tooted. We've failed, Stack said. We're done here. You're being serious? Julian turned to her, unimpressed. He spread one hand in an imperious shrug, another gesture that reminded me horribly of Alexander Lilburn. I should have broken Julian's neck with a tentacle while I'd been able to. So much for your fearless reputation. This how you acted in the field? Ran away at the first sign of too many jihadis on the horizon? Sit down, Amy. I am paid to assess threats. This is too much of a threat. You're damn right we are, Rain grinned at her. Julian's expression twitched in the most curious and uncomfortable way, as if an alien set of mannerisms was trying to push through from under his skin, the ghost of a craggy frown in the corners of his eyes. Then it passed, he controlled the tremor, and shrugged with another easy ironic smile. We're still alive, aren't we? Alexander negotiated with her, Stack continued softly. Did his usual. He's dead. We're done here. And I say we're not. Julian slapped his palm against the table. I'm overruling you. I want to hear their demands, I'm very curious. Stack took a single deliberate step back and to the side. I'm out. You're what? Julian frowned at her. I'm out, she repeated, but not to him, to me. I'm gone. Well, you're certainly not taking the bloody car with you, Julian said. Rain snorted. I'll walk. I'm out. Wait, I croaked. Wait. How did you know I was blocked? From going outside? Stack paused, considered a second, then nodded in that tiny, subtle way of hers. Edward said. That's it? Rain asked. That's all you got? Edward said. We're not responsible for your condition, Julian butted in. Yes, Mr. Lilburn is aware of a wide-ranging change in the wall between here and the beyond. A sort of static effect, he called it, but we're not responsible. It was only a theory he had, that it might interfere with his niece's usual ability to make herself scarce. You stop looking for her, I almost spat. First condition. Condition? Evelyn hissed at me. Condition. Demand. Then we can talk return. Oh, yes, quite, Yule's son lit up, a bloodhound back on the scent of a deal. On the issue of Lauren Lilburn, my client is open to total flexibility. As she is now past the age of majority, she is of course free to choose who to associate with, to chart the course of her own life, and so on. But, her condition does make her susceptible to suggestion, to bad influences, and so forth. As thus, he wishes to be allowed to meet with her at least once every dash. I catch you after her, ever, I send you outside, I said. No. We can relay that to Edward, said Julian, one hand out to forestall Yuleson's bleeding. He won't like it much. I understand his niece does have a very special place in his heart, but we can relay it. No more dash, I had to stop, swallow, steady myself as Rain held me up. I managed to take some of my own weight on my feet. No more kidnappings. No more children in cages. Excuse me. Yuleson blinked his little ratty eyes, mouth open. My client has never been involved in dash. I know what I saw, I croaked, not at him but at Julian. No more children in cages. You do that, I find you, all of you. Outside. Leave you in some hell place, starve to death or get eaten. Not more kidnappings. Torture and kill every one of you, I slurred, inflamed by the memory. No more missing homeless people, none of it. Find out you have, 20 years from now I'll find you and resurrect your corpse and send you outside. A bold plan, Julian actually laughed. Very bold. No more slaves. No more torture. You seriously think they'll keep that promise? Evelyn muttered. Ahem. Ahem, yes, quite, Yuleson struggled to regain his footing. So, stipulations: no contact with Lauren Lilburn, and no more, shall criminal activity? Sounds like a good idea to me, Nicole said quietly, with all the gravity of real conviction. The look she gave Julian could have curdled milk. Yes, I think that is quite a reasonable starting point, don't you, Julian? Yulsun prattled on. Miss Stack, please, do sit down. There's no need for all this drama. See? We are talking, we are building a compromise here. Miss Morel and I have managed to make ourselves understood at last, we are getting somewhere. Are you, Heather? Are you quite alright, there? Twill told us what Heather saw, Michael Hopton put in. But we weren't quite sure if we should believe it or not. Was this for real, this kidnapping business? He waved a hand, lost for words. Didn't blame him. It was, Julian said, with a smile that made me sick. Alexander went further than any sane sanction. That's not what Lozzie told us, Rain mused. She said Eddie Boy was the fixer. Julian shrugged with both hands. We here to debate ethics, or make an agreement. Quite. Yulsun said. Recrimination will get us all nowhere fast, not at this stage of proceedings. He smiled, oily and smug once more. I am certain that all three parties represented here have engaged in unsavory activities of their own. Let he who is without sin cast the first stone and all that. Why Sharrowford? Evelyn asked softly. Why not pick up and go somewhere else? Julian sighed. You know why, say. You know why. Humor me. Because Sharrowford's an important place. The walls are thin here. Certain kinds of magic just work better. It's hardly the only place like that. True. Julian allowed himself another ironic smile. I wanted to wipe it off his face, felt the phantom limbs twitch in my mind with the desire to reach out and slap him again, break his teeth, rip his tongue out. Instead, that awful deep-rooted pain lanced into my sides again. I gasped and almost fell over, only Rain's support kept me on my feet. Evelyn stared at me, hissed, hospital, but I shook my head. Sharrowford is important to us, Julian was carrying on, because of the material basis of Alexander's work. You know what I'm talking about, the subdimension, the pocket behind the city. Yes, the inadvisable castle. A folly, certainly, but what it was built on is a treasure trove of knowledge from beyond. There's an entity down there, embedded like a comet after landfall. Saw it, I croaked. Quite. Did you now? His eyes blazed at me with sudden curious intensity. Its offspring, as far as we understand, Julian answered. Our aims are simple, we wish to establish contact, a dialogue, a link with the mind of the poor thing trapped down there. We want to understand. He nodded slowly as he spoke, mostly to Evelyn. We're not so different, you and I, Evelyn say. All we want to do is pursue our study of occult knowledge in peace. Evelyn looked at him like something she'd found on the underside of her boot. Conditions first, I croaked. Quite, Evelyn hissed. Going to help us, I said. Glasswick Tower, Alexander's corpse. We've been inside, Stack said, low and slow. The body's gone. Missing. Amy, Julian snapped, his ironic facade collapsing completely. I said, I'm out. She stared at me, gave me an imperceptible nod again. Who took the corpse? Evelyn demanded. I don't know. I'm leaving now. We're not done here yet, Amy, Julian said. Yes, we are. Evelyn snapped. Her hand went to the sports bag on the chair. She didn't need to open the zipper to spring the trap, but it made for a wonderful piece of theater. All the Hoptons got to their feet. Christine stood where she was, but the others backed up, unsure and unsteady. Yulsun yelped like a struck pig. Julian smiled and raised both hands. All right, I get the message, he said. Who took the corpse? I croaked. Heather, come on, time to go, Rain whispered in my ear. I tried to ignore the awful throbbing pulse in my side. Maybe I was bleeding internally. I could barely bring myself to care. The image of Alexander Lilburn's corpse up and walking around made me want to be sick. I can show you, if you really want to know, Julian said. He smiled. And something inside me clicked with horrible cold precision. Why exactly did this man's mannerisms remind me so much of Alexander? This man with different colored skin, of a different age, with a different accent. He wasn't even the right height, a good half head shorter than Alexander had been. Yulsun blinked in surprise. Julian? This wasn't in the plan, what are you doing? Julian. You really think you get told everything? Well, I never. Here, it's quite simple, Julian addressed Evelyn and I again. But I'll have to take something out of my pocket. Please, feel free to put a knife to my throat or whatever, if you think I'm about to do something nefarious. He smirked now, as if he was still perfectly in control. Evelyn glanced at me. It's you, isn't it? I whispered. Heather. Rain stiffened, I felt the tremor go up her body. What do you mean? Aha, but who is me? Julian asked. I think you have the wrong idea, Miss Morel. May I? He gestured at his pocket. Without waiting for permission, he pulled out a white handkerchief and spread it out on the tabletop, then placed his hand against it, fingers spread, palm down. You see, the reason you think I might be Alexander, which is absurd, by the way, because he's dead, isn't he? Is because I am based on Alexander. Preem, Evelyn snapped. She took a step back, eyes going wide. Not in public. Nicole said, on her feet too now. Say. Morel. Julian nodded to both of us. You've impressed me, though well, I dash. And on that first-person pronoun, Julian's North London accent died, in its place reared something older, more familiar, a local accent from a time when England still had local accents. A Sharrowford accent. His voice itself died too, replaced with a much older tone, the grumbly, reedy rasp of a lifetime of cigarette smoke, fussy in particular and somehow coldly reptilian. I have a detailed understanding of your limits, not Julian continued, even as Preem jerked forward, as the doll demon moved to dart around the table and stop him. And you do not intimidate me. We talk as equals. I shall have to consider your conditions most carefully. Harry, you will find the real Julian asleep in his bed. Give him a pay rise, will you? That's a good fellow. Julian seemed to melt suddenly, his flesh running and drooping like hot candle wax before any of us could react and grab him, before Preem could cross the few paces and bundle him to the ground. For one horrible moment his face appeared locked in a scream, then sloughed away completely. For a split second I saw the true face beneath. Considering his cowardice and caution, it could only have been the image of a distant pilot, not the real thing wrapped in a flesh suit. White, craggy, liver-spotted, with big owl-like eyes framed by bushy gray brows like rotting caterpillars. Thin, bloodless lips, his neck a waddle of loose flesh. Do say hello to my niece, said Edward Lilburn. I'll be in touch. With a comically understated pop echoed by a popping of air pressure in the ears of everyone present, Julian vanished, and took Edward's momentary image with him, snuffed out by the empty air. He left behind a layer of peeled and bloody skin stuck to the handkerchief, as if he'd gripped frozen metal. I coughed, almost gagged in shock. Was it my imagination, or did I taste blood in the back of my throat? Quite, Evelyn hissed, jaw tight. I picked him up from his flat this morning, Yulsun said, staring wide-eyed and slack-jawed at the place his assistant had sat. I don't, for pities, that man does not pay me enough money to act his fool. Stack said. I was not aware he could do that.